Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the meeting of the Ojai City Council. Will the clerk please call the roll?
Mayor Johnston,
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Francina,
Here.
Councilmember Blatz.
Here.
Councilmember Haney.
Here.
Councilmember Wyrick.
Here.
Okay, we are all present and accounted for. James, will you lead us in the pledge?
Ready, begin.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I couldn't believe that. They've never done anything.
Okay, on approval of the agenda, are there any changes?
They just have a litigation office up here because this house
Okay,
is.
if I don't hear any objection, the agenda is approved as submitted. Our next item is presentation, and we have the pleasure of some guests as well as some locals that have made major contributions for leading by example with regard to energy efficiency as well as helping fight the worldwide war on climate. The climate's having war on us right now, but we need to start dealing with it. So we have presentations of certificates honoring a couple of the local businesses. But before we do that, I have the pleasure of introducing Javier Salcedo, who is with the Energy Alliance, and he's going to give us a brief overview on what this is about.
Mayor and council members, thank you for having me here. My name is Javier Salcedo. I'm with the Ventura County Regional Energy Alliance. One of our programs is the Green Business Certification Program that we do for your city and other cities in the county. This program is set up to recognize a lot of the businesses that are doing a little bit better for the environment by doing measuring savings of energy, water, gas, as well as reducing the amount of waste that they have, reducing any type of toxic materials that they come in contact. And they've been doing a lot of work. Some of the folks here have to go through 70 different measures of energy and reduction in order to be certified. So they do a lot of good work, and some of them are already doing some of those practices. They also usually set up an environmental program for the employees so that the employees could actually learn what they're doing in the job site and also take that to their home, helping the environment and continuing the recycling trend and the energy savings trend. So today we have some businesses here in the area that have certified this year, and they'll be coming up, and thank you, and please let us know if you have any businesses here that want to certify in the area. Please call me. It's a free program. We help you with LED lighting, free. Gas company will come in and do what they can also for free. So it's a really good program, and you get recognized, you get a certificate, and it's a really good program. And I thank you for your support, and we'll continue to come up and help the businesses that want to get certified.
Okay, thank you, Javier. Appreciate that. When these energy programs started way back, once when we had I'm thinking back in the late 70s, the early 80s. A lot of it was an economic issue as well as the energy shortage back in the days when we were relying solely on oil and gas to produce a lot of this, and coal. And then it got, as time goes along, we start talking about other ways in which we needed to save. We remember in the late 90s when we had the brownouts and the blackouts because of a lack of power. Since those days, those kinds of problems have been dwarfed by the threat upon the earth with climate change and the whole issue of carbon. And while that's it's easy to get depressed and want to despair, but it's all those little steps that can be taken, and there's nothing better than to see our businesses helping educate the public. It's particularly difficult to do some of these things particularly like in the restaurant business, where it has to be able to be affordable and to meet the expectations of the customers, at the same time trying to get everybody to change our behaviors as part of the general contribution towards improving the environment and reducing the carbon footprint. So we have, I believe, we have 3 certificates to present tonight. We were going to present one to Grace Malloy at Poco Farms, but they were unable to be here, so we may be able to do that at a later date. We have Elizabeth Rubio, who owns is it Soiree Photo Booth? Elizabeth, if you will come up and.
She's here yet.
Is she what?
She's not here yet.
Oh, she's not here. Okay, well then, our guests of honor,
Yes.
2 of my favorite people. We have Steve Sprinkle and Olivia Chase, farmer and the cook. So why don't we do that one? And Steve, I'm going to come on. And I think we all are familiar with Farmer and the Cook. I'll come around now.
Yeah. Hi, Olivia. Hi, Steve.
He's coming to see you.
Yeah, right.
Seems like an I think. I had no
You want
idea.
to stand over here?
I had no idea.
I want one only with her.
You know, it's funny.
And then I'll-
I was at the MAC
because
meeting
this is
yesterday.
for-
They did actually ask how many people live in Oakville. Because they're talking about Oakview issues. But we don't do that.
I should say that this award is entirely Olivia's doing.
Javier, don't leave yet. I have a
This
question.
award is entirely Olivia's doing.
This is who's it.
She signed into it and itemized every single
Get to the mic.
compliance, and she doggedly pursued it.
Oh,
Why don't you say that to the mic so that,
Say it
if you
to
say it
the
to the
mic.
mic, then everybody on television will hear
Okay,
it.
so,
Yeah.
Okay?
This award is Olivia's award, Olivia Chase's award, because she received the documentation and she fulfilled every line item and complied with everything. And I should say,
Here are the line items in the report card.
these are the line items, and
Thanks.
in 2006, she elected to cover the building with solar panels.
They don't use them, they just cover it.
Cover the bill, and they paid for themselves in 6 years. One thing that we didn't recognize, 10, let's see, what, 6 or 10? One thing we didn't recognize was that the value of the electricity was going to increase with all the rate increases.
Right.
And so all the math, it was to our favor. You mentioned footprint too, and we intentionally designed our business so that we didn't commute, that we had fewer miles on our cars, and so that the farm is really close to our business intentionally. And commuting and and trying to draw people to work where they live is a really important aspect to environmental improvement.
Absolutely, and then you made some efforts there on your water recycling.
Yes, of course, yeah.
That's right.
Thank you.
And the food is not only very tasty, but very healthy, so.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Let's keep it
And
friendly.
from the looks of the audience, I think everyone here probably has
yeah,
enjoyed
we
that
love
cuisine.
food. Mr. Mayor, can I ask a question? Okay. Can you make clear to the audience how a business, like, is there a website, and it seems like our goal should be for every business to get certified.
I believe so. And I think that this community definitely would help, and are really eager when we come and talk to them.
Good.
So yeah, that's something to do. So what you would do is, we got my business cards, I have
Yeah.
cards out here, and you can basically just call me and say, hey, I want to be certified, and I will come out and do a first assessment of your building. I want to know what you guys are doing. We certify the building and the people in it, not your product, but, so we'll come and do an assessment, and then we'll help you get started. It's mostly web-based. There's, could be, depending on what type of business you have, you might have 50 or 70 or 80 questions that you need to answer. And it's kind of like a learning experience. As you start answering every single question, you actually realize that you've been doing some good things and you've been doing some things that need to be changed. And so if you get stuck, we're there to back you up and tell you, okay, this is how we fix that. And we help you find product. We help you find different things. For example, we're trying to cut down on the plastic. So, you know, that's one of the items that if you have a restaurant, that's one of the big items that you'll have to make a decision. But there's other things like maybe an office building where you're basically looking at recycling paper and things like that. So just give us a call. We'll come and help you. It doesn't cost a lot other than, you know, maybe the lighting. If you do it right away, or you could do it down the road. We have a policy, environmental policy that we can help you with, and different things like that. So.
Well, this is great. So it's called the Ventura County Regional Energy Alliance, and the website is vcenergy.org.
Correct.
That's great.
And that's where
Thank you.
You can find us and just give us a call. We'll come out and do that. So this is one of my favorite places to come out and talk about energy efficiency and green business, because a lot of people want to do it and they really want to get engaged.
Yeah.
So
I'm
thank you.
taking this to Rainbow Bridge tomorrow morning.
Okay.
Here, I'll give you,
I am.
here's another card. Yeah, you can take it to more than one place, yeah. Okay, thank you, Javier.
Thank you.
Yeah, and let's have a round of applause for, okay, where does that bring us to?
In the Sane
We,
Center?
We've had the closed session. What did I do with my regular thing? Okay.
Mayor, if it's in order, I'll make a motion to approve consent calendar items A through J.
Okay, moved and seconded. Any discussion? Without objection, so ordered. That takes us, what, to public hearing? Second reading of the ordinance amending the Ojai Municipal Code, Title IX, adopting the California Building Code and amendments. Mr. City Manager?
Thank you. And this item came before council last meeting for the first reading. Today it's back for the second reading. It is the building code update for the 2019 cycle with local amendments focused on fire-resistant standards. The city adopted local amendments to the building code, mostly focused on enhanced fire safety requirements earlier this year in March of 2019. However, that was for the 2016 building code cycle. The 2019 cycle has just begun, and this year we would be adopting fairly early, which is an accomplishment. The staff has met with the Building Appeals Board to review the building code updates, and the Building Appeals Board and staff recommended and agreed on 3 types of amendments, mostly focused on type 1 is high fire hazard standards for alterations to property. Option 2, or the second kind of group of updates, is eliminating the use of wood shingles and shakes to increase fire safety. And then the third group of updates is mostly related to pool and spa language, which is adding that language into the building code. As noted at the last meeting, this means more fire-resistant buildings, but the drawback, of course, the flip side of that is that there will likely be some increased cost for some of those alterations due to having to build to a higher standard. The Building Appeals Board and staff both recommended these changes, though, because of the increased need for fire safety improvements.
Okay.
And with that, it's before council.
Okay, are there any questions of staff? If not, I'll open the, what?
Move to approve?
Well, no, we need a public
Public
hearing
hearing.
here, or do we open the hearing again?
Yeah, we do. This is one where normally we only have one hearing, but there's a special statute for the building code, 2 hearings.
Okay, so I will now open the public hearing, and do we have any cards? We have no cards. Okay, well then, would you, yeah, Dale?
Oh, yeah.
Thank you. Dale Hansen. I live in the city, and I'm on the Building Appeals Board. I just wanted to say that in many cases, you know, where you have to increase the roof to a higher standard, it's because there was damage done to it, and that's covered by the insurance company. It's true, it costs more. Any damage that's done to the building, the insurance company pays for it, so not the owner. So I just wanted to make sure everyone knew that. Thank you.
It spreads the cost. I guess the premium payers in the end can get to help, but, okay, well then if there, yes, ma'am, please come to the mic.
Sue Williamson, I just have a question for you. I don't know if this was taken into consideration about in historic districts. For instance, in Taramina, there's a definition of how the roof is supposed to be constructed, and the way it is supposed to be is a total fire hazard. There's supposed to be under the eaves something that doesn't allow the air,
Yeah, to box in the
Yeah.
eaves, yeah.
So I just wonder if you've considered that. I just wanted to raise it as it should be considered if,
Okay.
thanks.
Yeah, so as any new roof or remodel roof above the size limit in the Taramina Historic District must comply with the Historic District's requirements, but also must meet the safety requirements in the new building code. And that, as I understand it, is physically doable. So
Okay.
you can have a roof that complies with Historic District standards, but also must be safe, as defined by the building
You
code.
mean they're
update.
not in conflict, or
My understanding is they don't conflict, although there may be a slightly higher cost associated with that.
right? Okay, we'll close the public hearing and take the matter for deliberation.
Move to approve.
Okay,
Second.
we have a motion and a second. Is there any further discussion on this item?
No, just want to clarify that my understanding that this can be amended if we want to electrify the city or introduce cob housing and all of that.
Right, the council can anytime to adopt further amendments with the appropriate process.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, do we need a roll call on this as an ordinance?
Yep.
Will the clerk please call the roll?
Councilmember Wyrick?
Yes.
Councilmember Haney?
Yes.
Councilmember Blatz?
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Francina?
Yes.
Mayor Johnston?
Yes. Okay, motion passes, and I want to commend the staff for the the early delivery of this, also the appeals board for
Building
their
Appeals
work
Board.
on that.
I know they put hours into it, Mayor.
yeah.
They really did.
Previously, we were like, a year or two behind, almost didn't make the next anniversary before the
To
new
the
one
other
came out.
end. Yeah, I love it.
Okay, we have, item number 3 is the discussion on animal keeping. Mr. City Manager.
Yes, thank you. And I have a brief staff report on that. Over the last few months, the topic of animal keeping standards has come up at a few different city council meetings. And we noted recently that specific animal keeping standards were removed from the zoning ordinance in 2003. Although the current code has some land uses that mention animal keeping, standards for specific animal keeping standards are not included in the current city code. We noted that we wanted to bring this back to correct, and council had asked to bring it back quickly, so the item is returned before you. One of the requests was for us to look at the county ordinance and see if the county ordinance could be adopted within the city. That ordinance is attached. We've reviewed that ordinance. We reviewed the city's code section from prior to 2003, and we reviewed a couple of other city ordinances. And ultimately, we don't find that any of those are a direct fit for the city. One of the things with the county's ordinance is that their zoning grouping doesn't match, their zones do not match up to the city's zones, so it would need to be tweaked. So our recommendation is to to direct the planning commission to review the animal keeping standards and make a recommendation to return to city council. We included a lot of detailed ordinances from other cities. We can get into those, but I'll start with that.
Okay. Are there any questions of staff?
I have a question.
Okay, Susan?
Is it possible, because this is really a huge thing, the more I looked at it, and it includes even beekeeping. So is it possible, for example, to simply adopt the guidelines for preparing a manure management plan? Could we do that separate so that the current problems can be addressed?
Yeah, we could do that. I agree. part of our conclusion on this is a big issue that will impact residents for a long time. and
Yeah,
we didn't want to
yeah.
just rush and adopt
Yeah,
something because
yeah.
it's quick and easy. So we agree with that, and we could look at doing a manure management in the meantime.
Okay.
So we could do that.
All right, thank you.
Are there other questions of staff before we take public comment? Seeing none, okay, we will take public comment. We have Elizabeth Silva with David Silva on deck.
Howdy, thanks for having us.
Okay.
My name's David Silva, this is my wife Elizabeth. We've lived on Drown Avenue since 2012. We're here tonight to ask the City Council to please direct the city staff to create a much-needed animal keeping ordinance, an ordinance that Ojai once had until apparently an administrative oversight removed it at the end of 2003, and an ordinance that every city in Ventura County, aside from Ojai, currently has on their books. We request that this new ordinance have rules about the type and amount of animals allowed per acre, manure management, dust mitigation, and fly control. We feel that an animal keeping ordinance will foster best practices for animal keeping, help promote neighborhood harmony, and make people, animals, and the environment more healthy. For the past 3 years, the lack of an ordinance has directly affected the life of my wife and I, as well as the lives of our neighbors along Drown Avenue on the corner of Grand. In late 2016, a person bought a property on Daly Road zoned for livestock and animals. This abuts our backyards on Drown. Since then, at this property, there have been up to 6 horses, 4 goats, a hog, half dozen chickens, and several dogs, all on 1.3 acres, some land of which, of course, is partially taken up by the house. Too many animals on too small of a space quickly killed all the plants and compacted the soil, creating an enormous amount of dust, which turns to runoff in the rainy season. To make things worse, the manure was cleaned up infrequently and put in a giant pile at the property line closest to all of our backyards and to Fox Barranca, a seasonal waterway that runs between our properties and eventually ends up in the Ventura River and the ocean. Since the average horse poops about 50 pounds of manure per day, this means that up to 2,000 pounds of manure per week sits in the sun, drying up and turning to dust, and all of this manure dust has been blowing on our houses and running into the Barranca for the past 3 years during winter, a clear violation of the Ventura County Air Pollution Control District's nuisance dust laws and a manure runoff rules put in place by the state and regional water quality control boards. Not only has this situation affected the environment, it's affected my wife's health. She's a healthy, athletic woman who has never had breathing problems of any kind until the new owners moved into the property behind us at the end of 2016. The constant exposure to their dust has caused her to have constant coughing and wheezing when she exercises at times and her speech is constricted. We recently had the dust on our house tested by an independent environmental testing company recommended to us by the Ventura County Air Pollution Control District, and every test swab the company did along the entire length of our house came back positive for bacteria. Additionally, her doctor who works for Ventura County had her lungs tested, and they showed that she has a chronic lung infection as directly linked to the manure dust she has been constantly exposed to for the past 3 years. We and our neighbors tried for 2 years to talk to the homeowner to no avail. It was only in March of 2019 when it was clear that the owner of this property was not going to be a good neighbor and that we all turned to the city and filed complaints. While there has been some improvements, many of the issues, including manure dust, continue.
Since we filed the complaints in March, there's been many emails between myself and the city officials. In those emails, much has been made of the homeowners' rights to have horses on their property due to the zoning. I'd like to point out that one's health and the ability to breathe properly is a right, and it's a basic human right at that. Owning livestock and horses and keeping them on one's property is a privilege that not everyone in Ojai gets due to the zoning in our community. If you're involved in city government, you need to understand the definitions of both words and the difference between a right and a privilege as they pertain to government. In the case of our Daly Road neighbor, they certainly have the privilege to own animals because of the zoning. But they also have the responsibility not to have those animals impact those of us who live around them. While many livestock and horse owners in Ojai are great about not impacting their neighbors, some are not, and the city and its hired officials need to have ordinances and rules on the books so that they have the tools they need to protect the health of citizens as well as our environment. At the September 24th, 2019 City Council meeting, the City Attorney Matthew Summers falsely stated that as he understood it, some neighbors have said that horses shouldn't be allowed, period, on Daly Road. This is absolutely false, and I'd ask the city attorney to publicly retract his statement unless he can provide evidence to the contrary. I want to make one point very clear. Absolutely no one on Drown Avenue wants horses or livestock to be banned on Daly or anywhere else within city limits. Nor are we asking for the zoning to be changed. In fact, my husband and I bought our property knowing full well that we were surrounded by properties that were zoned for livestock and horses. It was actually one of the reasons we bought the property. We love animals, and I'm a lifelong horseback rider. And we enjoy seeing and interacting with the horses that were owned by the former owners of the Daly property. While there was little dust and smell from the former owners' horses, it was minimal because they cleaned up their manure on a daily basis. They watered down their riding ring for a bit before they rode, and a reasonable amount of animals were on the property for the size of it. From 2012 until the end of 2016, when the property was sold, all of us in the neighborhood got along, horse owners and non-horse owners alike. What we're simply asking for here is that horse and livestock owners be good neighbors, have reasonable amount of animals for the size of the lot they own, and do best practices on their property to keep down the dust, smell, and flies. None of these requests seem outrageous. They just seem like common courtesy and what is best for the health of the animals, the environment, and everyone who lives and visits Ojai. We support the well-researched report submitted by the city manager on this issue, and we request that the city council take the report's conclusions and take their time so that Ojai can create a new animal keeping ordinance that helps all of us. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, that's all the cards that I have on this topic. What is the recommendation? You
Could I
what?
ask
Sure.
Elizabeth a question? Do you feel that these, this is from the Ventura, you provided us with this information, from the Ventura County Watershed Protection District, Guidelines for Preparing a Manure Management Plan. I thought it was fabulous. Would that address at least the most pressing problems if we adopted this, if we were able to adopt this tonight? Because it's going to take.
You can't adopt something that's neither on the agenda nor been reviewed by the council.
We could bring it back soon.
Then I
You could come back
misunderstood
next
your
time.
reply.
That's
Sorry.
We could bring it
Yeah,
back.
Okay,
yeah,
through the chair, please.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
I thought you said
Through
that.
the chair,
we could.
please.
Okay. So anyway, all right, so that's all. Or I did want your opinion.
Yeah, well, you get the answer to
Yeah.
the question.
I think that it would definitely help with one of the issues. But I really would request that Mr. Summers either provide evidence that we are anti-horse or retract his statement.
Okay, well,
Because I don't want that to be publicly, on public record. It's not true.
Well, thank you.
Yeah.
Good job, James. Thank you.
I move approval of the staff recommendation.
I have a question. I was trying to get.
Okay.
Are we done, by the way?
Well, we have a
motion.
motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
Okay, we have a motion second. Ryan?
There are county regulations regarding horse manure runoff. Is that enforced even in the city by the county? Right, does the county enforce that in the city? Do you know?
Depends on the agency of the county, but they have the power to enforce them, yes.
My understanding is I think they do. So I think what Susan was talking about as far as an ordinance that would change that, I wanted to verify that, but I think that's already applicable to properties in the Ojai Valley.
I haven't seen
Or
the
in the city of
document.
Ojai, excuse me.
I haven't seen the document that Mayor Pro Tem Francine
Okay.
is referencing, but if it's an ordinance of the Air Pollution Control District or of another overarching county agency that's not their land use agency, then that is enforceable throughout the county.
I think
What's
when-
not enforceable in the city is a county land use authority. That's only enforceable by the city.
Because I believe that manure runoff that goes in any stream is still the county has authority over that.
Right.
Agreed
they
with
do.
that.
Because we're party to that.
So
I just wanted to make you aware of that. Agreement.
Agreed. Yeah, if it's runoff into a
Party to
stream,
that
the,
agreement. Right.
the county has the power to enforce that, and of course, the complaint can be filed with the county, and they have their tools.
Thank you.
Okay, and I have other questions of staff. Is it possible, I mean, this animal keeping includes beekeeping, chickens. More and more people want to have chickens, so they have healthy eggs because they're gardening and all that. Do we have to keep all of this in one? Is that what you're recommending? And then didn't we already do something about beekeeping already,
Yeah,
separate?
a few years ago.
We have beekeeping separate. We were recommending the way it was prior to 2003 was in section, Title 10, we had all of the animal keeping standards in one place to make it easy for the average resident. So we're recommending doing that again.
Okay.
Rather than have them scattered in different chapters.
But we also, of course, don't recommend changing the council's past policy choices on beekeeping. That should just be
Right.
ported over.
Yes,
And-
yes.
In
Yeah.
2003, when it passed, do you guys have any context for, excuse me, you gentlemen I am looking at, do you have any context for what was going on? Because if memory recalls, it was a long time ago, but I believe that there was a series of individuals that were raising chickens inside the city, and that ordinance was passed to eliminate that. It sounds like they eliminated the animal keeping ordinance, but eliminating it didn't mean it was illegal.
Right, and
Is that what was the context of that by any chance?
so
or
I
do you
don't
know?
I don't know the exact context of it. We did a little bit of research, and the conclusion seemed to be that it just got dropped out when all of Title 10 got redone. And the timelines match up with those, but the 2003 version was interesting because it had pretty clear standards, but it created a pretty complex permitting scheme where people would have to come in and get permits for anything other than dogs, cats, and horses, which doesn't necessarily solve some of the issues we're seeing right now. So that's why we didn't just recommend adopting that again.
Okay. Other questions on
Just had,
the motion, or?
Just one question, Mayor. So we're not pitting homeowners against homeowners. We need to make sure we include a process for complaints, and I didn't necessarily see that in any of the literature. Again, a complaint should be private, should be handled within, and resolved, by the agencies that can, so.
Yeah. And we also are working on, we are getting the two people in place, the community development manager and the assistant city manager who just joined the team. And we're going to work on code compliance procedures and protocols, which the city has also not had for quite a while. So we're going to bring those back too.
Great, okay.
Okay.
There was a motion.
Yeah, there is motion and a second. If there's no further discussion and no objection to the motion,
I'm thinking, okay? So what we're sending to the planning commission is what we have here, and then they're going to grapple with it and come back with their standards, and then we're going to have an opportunity to weigh in.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
And the idea is that the planning commission may be best suited to have the deep dive into the matter, give it a full hearing, take a look at these 3 samples, take a look at other samples, and really do the deep dive into the matter, come up with a comprehensive recommendation, then bring that back to council for your action. That's the goal.
And I also, just a distinction to help council, I believe it's okay, since this is a purely legislative effort, that a council person can show up and express
Yes,
an
that's
opinion
true.
at a-
Yeah,
at a-
I plan to do
at a
that.
planning commission meeting
Yeah.
on this type of
Yeah.
issue.
Yeah, because it's adopting legislation, the due process rules don't apply, so you can participate fully in the planning commission discussion as well, if
Okay.
desired. Or refrain until the council.
And then can you clarify what we can do right now to clean up all this manure? Because obviously it sounds like they're not doing real composting. They're not doing best practices. That's obvious, or at least from what I'm reading.
Yeah,
and
so
hearing.
there is an open code case. I'm not sure how much.
Yeah, so there's an open code case, as has been obliquely referred to, and the city staff is taking a look at that matter. As has been noted, even by the residents, some progress has been made. More is yet to come. There's also, of course, more than one version of the facts. I think probably 3 versions, and that is being worked through. In terms of needed council action, I think staff doesn't see a need for immediate council action tonight to solve that. I think we have the existing tools we need. It's more a matter of one person's compliance is another person's not compliance. And there's some underlying factual issues that require resolution. But those that isn't done for those concerned about the case in the audience. It's still in progress, and more work is being done there.
And I wanted to note there are a couple of issues that I'm looking at with this. We had another case recently where a resident had several roosters at their next door neighbor, or their next door neighbor had several roosters, and essentially with the current code, for us to do any enforcement on that, we would have to go out with a decibel reader and sit out there and try to hear the roosters and catch them, and it's ridiculous. So there are more than just one issue that make me want to resolve this and adopt some good regulations.
Okay.
Okay, any other questions, Susan?
I just one quick question, Matt. If the city is not able to enforce something on this, or we don't have the authority to enforce it, or it falls under a gap in our regulations that we can't do anything, is there still an option for the individual citizens to privately do anything about it? I mean, is there still a private remedy?
Yes, if a matter rises to the level of a private nuisance that's so injurious to health or safety or so injurious to a person's enjoyment of the property as to qualify as a nuisance, then they can certainly bring a private lawsuit. I fully recognize that lawsuits between neighbors is never a favored outcome.
But that extends a little further than we can go as a city.
They certainly retain that option, yes. And that also can take into account things that might not impact the community as a whole, but impact one particular neighbor.
Okay.
There is a remedy for that tool. In addition, of course, those county agencies that are referenced in their county standards complaints can be made to them. And the city also has, under the generic public nuisance standards, if the facts present themselves as a public nuisance, something so injurious to health or safety and public welfare as to be dangerous, then the city can pursue it just under the generic nuisance statutes.
Okay.
Okay, further questions?
I hope I understood that you can do something now, because it's a nuisance.
To the extent that the facts bear out that it is a nuisance,
Yeah,
yes.
Yeah, okay.
Okay, did you have any more questions, Susan?
Not at the moment, thank you.
Okay, well, it's going to be over here in a moment.
Yeah, I know.
Okay, if there's no further discussion, we have a motion, and a second, and if I hear no objection, we will so order and send this to the Planning Commission. And this sort of, in my view, is something the Planning Commissions should look at. It's land use and permitted uses within zones, so good luck. Okay.
Okay, no vote?
Okay, well, the next topic is leaf blower.
No.
and-
Order, Mayor, on this time.
Oh, pardon me, yeah, okay, yeah. Is that what you were, is that what you were referring to when you were talking about?
No, usually we close
Yeah, we should've.
the public
Yeah.
comment and bring it back to council for discussion.
Okay, my apologies, we're running a little late here on the public comment, so I have the top one here, Sergeant Brian. To what do we owe the pleasure?
Yeah, no.
Rarely, the rare speaker.
Security forces
Good evening,
are-
council. I wanted to call the public and your attention to this Saturday at the Ojai Police Station in conjunction with the Drug Administration Agency's Drug Take Back between 9 a.m. and 1 p.m. It's an excellent time to empty out your medicine cabinet of all those expired medications that we don't want in the environment, and we certainly don't want in the hands of the wrong people. So we'll have staff on hand for the 4 hours there, lots of boxes to fill. We do have the sign at the entrance to the city, but open to all to come and discard their extra pharmaceuticals. We do not take needles or syringes. Those can be taken at Ojai Hospital, but everything else we'd gladly take, and bring your quantity and we'll clean it up. So that's what that's about.
Okay, do you bring that in the bottles or all dumped out into a bag?
You can bring them in the bottles. We sometimes encourage you to put them in a bag, but for this event, we'll take the bottles so you get rid of your plastics as well.
Okay, great.
I have
Thank you.
a question. This includes animal medicine, right?
Absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely. Yeah, we'll take it all. Like I said, we have several large boxes we'd like to fill and get that,
Okay.
have a
Thank
real
you.
successful day. Thank you.
Thanks, Brian. Susan Whitewood. And Patty, you're on deck.
Good evening, Mayor, Mayor Pro Tem, council members, and city staff. My name is Susan Whitewood, and I am the housing manager for the County of Ventura Behavioral Health Department. I'm here tonight to give you information on funding available to our county to build housing for the homeless and the mentally ill. Last November, there was a voter initiative on our ballots called the No Place Like Home Act. And California voters approved this initiative, and the funding is here for us now. The funding can be used, pardon me, I'm going to read from a list, for acquisition, design, construction, rehabilitation, capitalized operating reserves for the project, and preservation costs. It's basically for bricks and mortar. The Behavioral Health Department is the eligible applicant for this funding, but the Behavioral Health Department does not build housing, so we partner with developers who have experience building permanent supportive housing for homeless and mentally ill. We partner with those developers, and the No Place Like Home funding will pay for a minimum of 5 units and a maximum of 49% of the total affordable housing project. And when I say affordable housing, I'm talking a mixed project of units for people that have incomes as high as 60% of the area median income, which is about $80,000 per year. So the project itself is an affordable housing project. And then throughout the project, there are units restricted for homeless and mentally ill at 30% of the area median income, which is about $22,000 per year for individuals. And then the Behavioral Health Department provides supportive services for those scattered restricted units. There are 4 rounds of funding from the state available to us. The first and second rounds have come and gone. And round 2 actually just closed. Round 3 will be available in September of next year. And I wanted to encourage you to contact us, to work with local developers if your city is interested in building that type of housing. There is certainly a need. In Ojai, I have 26 seconds, that makes me a little nervous. In Ojai last year, your homeless count increased by 52%. I actually have the numbers going back 12 years. If you were interested in a further discussion, I'd be welcome to come back and do a presentation, but I'm down to 10 seconds.
Yeah. Mayor, I had a question.
Yes, Bill.
Could you define the breadth of acquisition? In other words, is that, what does that mean exactly in terms of, does that mean only existing improved properties for renovation? Could it include a piece of land, for example?
Yeah, it could include a piece of land. You have to create new units.
Right.
So you couldn't acquire the land and then just sit on it.
No, it'd have to be part
Correct.
of, but it could include land that things could be would then be covenanted to be built on.
Correct. So again, it's acquisition, design, construction, rehabilitation, preservation, capitalized operating reserves, and then there's one that I hate to put forth because it's not what it sounds like. It's a shared housing option, but the county will not entertain the shared housing option under No Place Like Home. It's very cumbersome.
Okay, thank you.
Mayor, I had a question.
Randy?
I didn't hear if there was a grant funding amount. Are there?
It's not grant funding. It's actually loans that when the developer builds their pro forma for the project, they have a developer fee in there. And then these loans also come with a long-term tax credit. So there is incentive to the developer to build these types of projects.
And how many millions of dollars are set aside for this?
That's a great question. Under round 2, there was $90 million set aside for large counties to compete for in the entire state. There's actually 4 categories of applicants. The first category is what I like to call too large to fail, which is like the Los Angeles County, San Diego County, San Francisco, and I think it was Santa Clara County. The state just gave them their money and pretty much said, here, build your projects. Then there's the large county grouping, of which Ventura County is the smallest fish in that pond. We're considered a large county, medium-sized county and small-sized county. In the large county category under actually both rounds 1 and 2, there's $90 million available.
And then the last thing is I heard 49%.
Yeah, so it's a minimum of 5 units.
Right.
So your project has to be a minimum of 5, a total of 49% of the total project. So if you had, let's say 30 units, 14 of them could be restricted for homeless and mentally ill.
And Mayor, just to follow up, so I understand that, these projects can syndicate private tax credits?
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, are there any other questions? If not, okay, thank you very
you.
much.
Thank you.
I have a
appreciate it.
question. Are you leaving your contact information?
You know what? I just realized as I was sitting here talking to Dale that I gave out my last card today, but I have some handouts that I can leave with your
Please.
clerk.
Please, yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks for coming.
Yes, thank you. That sounds, especially Kimberly.
Okay, Patty, you're up, and Nick, you're on deck.
Good evening. I wanted to let you know about a grant program through Stonyfield Company, which sells organic yogurt. They're offering grants to help communities transition to organic practices to manage parks and playing fields. And I would like to help make this happen here in Ojai. And even if we don't get the grant, the city of Ojai should definitely make the commitment to implement organic management policies. The city of Irvine and the city of Malibu have already done this. There's a large list that I sent you in an email. Many cities already and universities, including Harvard and Yale, are already managing their fields organically. So just to encourage all of us to move ahead with that, I am submitting 500 signatures that we gathered in 2017 that supports a pesticide-free Ojai, along with some other, let's see, we're asking this Ojai City Council to create a resolution encouraging, and these have been signed by the mayor himself, and also, I believe, Councilmember Francina, and the former council member Blatz, Paul Blatz. So we are asking the city council to create a resolution encouraging all restaurants to serve non-GMO foods that are grown without pesticides on their menus, and encouraging farmers who sell at the Ojai Farmers Market to sell fruits and vegetables that are GMO-free and are grown without pesticides. We're also asking a banner to be hung from time to time across the highway through town, which states that the city of Ojai encourages healthy alternatives to pesticides and herbicides. And we're asking for an educational stand downtown in a prominent location that contains information and brochures on how backyards, landscapes, gardens, and farms can transition off of chemicals that are harmful to our health and the health of our ecosystems, wildlife, and pets. The city council, we're asking the city council to ensure the community members and visitors will be properly warned about pesticide applications that are about to take place in our area, with enough time to give people the chance to leave town for a day or two if they are chemically sensitive. And the main part was that we are in support of declaring Ojai a pesticide-free zone. And here are the 500 signatures. So I have 4 seconds, so I guess I'm done. But there's a lot more to my letter, and please read that, and I will be in contact with you to follow through with all of this. Thank you so much.
Thank you,
Can I just
Patty.
ask one question, Mayor?
Yes.
Mr. Mayor? You sent us a 9-pages of cities and municipalities and school,
Yeah.
that have already adopted these pesticide-free policies.
I have it
correct?
right here. I didn't make a lot of copies. But if
Okay.
you wanted to take-
Yeah, I only copied the first page, and I realized it was 9 pages. Thank you.
And I
Yeah.
also have a copy of a draft of our City of Ojai Earth-Friendly Management Policy.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Nick, you're up, and Jack Weber, you're on deck.
Good evening, Nick
He's got
Ojai.
books.
What?
You have books.
Yes, I have books. This is my support system this evening. One of the books is written in the 50s about New York, called The Death and Life of Great American Cities. Jaden Jacobs, if you've never heard of it. It's fascinating. New York is made up of about 1 million Ojais. I see a book coming out someday, The Death and Life of Great American Small Towns. And Ojai surely will qualify for that book. I just want to say I'm very encouraged about what's happening. I mean, mentioning Steve Sprinkle, who slid in there. He was looking for a place to grow his food as close as he could to people who would be working with it, who wouldn't have to get in cars or trucks. And the Thousand Oaks is our suburb, grand suburb to the south, is just unveiled the Timber School site, which is the oldest historic building in Conejo Valley. 200 units, 210 unit apartment complex. And I'm sure that the business people were very excited about that because we all know that the more people who are able to walk and move in easy fashion without having to find a parking place is good for business. And I see that happening in Ojai, but I am sorry to say that, well, I'd like to encourage all of you, and not just you at the big desk, but everyone in the room who might have a personal contact with the Ojai Unified School District's board to break down the somewhat impasse that seems to appear between your group or our group as city interested citizens in the future of downtown. Because we all know the school board with their Chaparral site has a lot to do with the future of this town. And it would be interesting to know if any of you have in your mind, how many employees does the city have? Where do they live? And what do they use to get to work? How do they get to work? I'm going to ask the school board the same thing at their next meeting. And if they can't come up with the answer, I'm going to say, well, you've got 48 hours or something. I mean, this is
Or else,
just,
right?
anyway.
Nick will be after you.
Well, book on 'em.
Another two books that are really fascinating for people who've never heard of it. One, I just found this Social Responsibility by Krishnamurti, which is surprising. You don't have to read for hours and hours or listen to any of his talks. In fact, in about 5 minutes, you can cover a whole topic. It's really great. And then this one is The Pattern Language, which is my my school experience.
Oh, that's so good.
Written by a mathematician architect from England who came and spoke, who taught at Berkeley for years. And anyway, that's it. I'm really encouraged also about this resolution of the application for are these funds that are coming to the city to update the general plan in housing, circulation, and land use?
And
Here's a unique opportunity to put aside some of our cherished ideas and really look anew at the city.
Thank you, Nick. Jack, you're up. 3 minutes?
Sure. Sorry for my bit of angst. I have an appointment to get to, and I was frustrated that we went over and it didn't start at 7:30, so thanks. So I just want to second, good evening, everybody. First of all, council members, I've been sending you emails about climate change. I kind of stopped doing that last week because I didn't hear any response except for a little bit from Sousa, so thank you. But I would like to keep doing that, and can I get any sign if that's something that's desired? Because I have other things to do as well, but I'm trying to educate because it takes a long time to really understand the dynamics and the comprehensiveness of the climate crisis. So is that something that
I've
that
been
you
reading
get?
them.
You have?
Yes, I
Okay,
have.
great.
Yes.
That's
But they
enough.
don't have to be every day.
No,
Maybe pace
no.
them out.
Yeah, that's good. Okay.
Every other day is good.
All right, great. So I second everything that Patty said, and I also have some signatures here for pesticide ban pertaining to a personal experience that I had that I think I shared with you all in a letter about being sprayed up on the mountain. I'm not sure what you're doing tonight about leaf blowers, but I've mentioned my rap about leaf blowers here and also in letters to you, and I just want to remind a couple stats that using a customer grade leaf blower that you just go get at Lowe's or Home Depot for 1 hour of time, alternating between full force and idle, is equivalent to driving a Toyota Camry from Los Angeles to Denver. 1 hour of leaf blower use. So every day, how many leaf blowers go off in Ojai and how much needless pollution is caused by that, not to mention all the other horrible things that leaf blowers do. So that's just a stat, and Michelle Ellison is going to follow up with some leaf blower information. I have a minute and 10 seconds left, and I want to briefly mention I've also written to you all about the amount of noise that's here in Ojai, and it is unbelievable. I'm actually moving out of town right now because I cannot tolerate it anymore. My blood pressure's been elevated for weeks. I can't have conversations in my home. It's been going on since the beginning of summer with all the Edison trucks, the jackhammering, the poles, and now it's the road over on Grandview spilling over into summer, and it's been months on end, and it's insanity. And, you know, I've been researching a little bit about noise pollution. So in addition to getting some good regulations on pesticides here in Ojai, I'm going to start advocating for some noise reduction around here. And at the very least, between these big projects, so they're going to finish the road like in 2 or 3 weeks, and then there's like a blacktop project after that. And I said, I'm out of here. I can't take it anymore. So maybe there could be some study, at least between these big projects in one neighborhood, to give the residents a break. That would be great. So that's all the time I have. Thank you. I'll put anything else in a letter.
You're basically saying project management with a view towards noise mitigation if possible.
Yeah, absolutely. And if it can't be mitigated, then at least give the residents a break before the next project starts. It's been like 4 months of pure noise, heavy equipment, chainsaws, chippers, like 3 chippers on the block, and it's insane.
Is this the Edison?
Yeah, it's
fire maintenance?
mostly the Edison fire maintenance.
But then there's CMWD and our street program.
Yeah, we
Yeah,
got
right.
Casitas and Edison on our street at the same
The backup bills
time.
from the trucks have been going on for 2 months or so, and I have to move right now. I have to move because I can't take it anymore, and I feel like it's hurting my health. And the WHO has, you know, a couple years ago, a lot of people don't know this, but they declared noise pollution second only to particulate pollution in the atmosphere is the greatest health effect right now in America. Noise pollution has tremendous health effects, negative health effects that people aren't aware of. Not even at the level of horrible heavy equipment noise, but just seemingly innocuous
Okay.
backdrop noise. So I don't have a copy of these signatures. Should I give them to you, and maybe will someone make a copy for me?
Yeah.
Why don't you give them to our city manager? There.
Yeah.
If you come in, yeah, go ahead and come in and we'll get it to you.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jack.
I have a quick question.
Yeah, Ryan.
Just for James. James, is this pesticide topic that we have heard a number of weeks in a row, is the climate committee gonna potentially look at this? Because it seems like this exact situation is kind of what we built the climate committee for. And I know it's not fully put together and it's still kind of work in progress, but this is that topic because we keep hearing about it. I'd really like somebody to take a deep dive and come back to us with some suggestions on what works and doesn't. I know Councilmember Haney has been talking to the farmers. I have too. I think they'd like to have more input, and that would seem like a good forum for it.
Yeah, I think that makes perfect sense. We had the steering committee meeting, and so we can start the list of items that they will dive into, but I'm sure that they will want to dig into that.
Yeah, I would hope this would be a priority. We've heard a lot about it. All right, thank you.
Okay, we are now to item number 4. Is that correct? Leaf blower and combustion engine term sheet. James.
Thank you. Okay. So this item before you is a term sheet for with options to amend the leaf blower ordinance or to possibly prohibit 2-stroke or 4-stroke internal combustion engines. There's also an option to that's been an additional option listed that's been prepared regarding banning liquid-fueled standby generators. 2-stroke and 4-stroke engines, for people unfamiliar, include items like gas leaf blowers, lawn mowers, chainsaws, and then there's some additional ones, smaller generators, portable welders. So the attached term sheet, depending on which option is selected, would either prohibit gas leaf blowers in additional zones. Currently, they're prohibited in the residential zones, and under certain conditions in other zones, this would expand that prohibition to all zones, or go further than that and possibly prohibit 2-stroke and 4-stroke internal combustion engines like the ones I just mentioned. So that item is here for your discussion.
Staff question?
Bill?
Have you, you and I have gone back and forth on this a little bit. Has there been any research or any identification of where appropriate information could come from in terms of displacement limits? Because where it's, the technology is most mature is for the very small internal combustion engines that also are the most polluting. Actually, the smaller they get, the more polluting they are, that are most easily substitutable into battery power. So have we had any idea of where we could maybe get some kind of, maybe contact APCD, actually talk to APCD, one of the people about that, some idea of setting, of understanding appropriate displacement limits that could be changed over time as technology matures?
Yeah.
And that would apply to both, it could apply to 2 and 4, or there could be different displacement limits. But I'm thinking that maybe it's the wrong question to ask in terms of just blanket, because it's the smaller engines that are most easily changed to electric and the most polluting.
Yeah.
And I just wondered if there's been some work on that at all.
We haven't reached out yet, but I thought of the same group you did with VCA, PCD. We can reach out to them when we bring this back. And what's before you is a term sheet. Obviously, it would have to come back, so we can come back with some additional information on that.
Okay. And the other thing is that, for example, it's true, there are no large chainsaws, I looked into this, that are 4-cycle right now for like emergency responders, but they're coming. The Steel has, I think the 4-mix engines are coming, but not yet deployed because of, I guess, some engineering issues with RPM or something having to do with, but it's coming. In other words, this is kind of a moving target, and my thinking was we identify the most polluting to start with, but we set up some kind of flexibility in the ordinance to allow for the technology maturing to then, be implemented. But on the other hand, like some of these things for, like the postal org, I don't know if the 4 cycles are being developed for that or not. But anyway, those are just my 2 comments.
Okay. Thank you.
And questions.
Other questions of staff before we take public comment?
And then we'll have a discussion, a full
Yeah,
discussion?
right, sure.
Okay.
Okay, we are going to take public comment, just as a refresher for everybody. I got several cards here that it's a 3-minute presentation by the citizens and possibly some question and answer from the council. Sharon Maliski, you are up, and Michelle Ellison, you are on deck.
Hi, good evening, council and staff. Thank you for hearing us on this issue. I think you're all aware within a few years, gas-powered lawn equipment is going to be the biggest source of ozone pollution in the state of California. And I know you all just recently declared a climate emergency. Thank you all for that. And I think we really need to address this issue in a more meaningful way. The gas-powered leaf blowers are ubiquitous. Despite the fact that there is an ordinance banning them, I encounter them nearly every day. Today, I would say 4 different times I heard them from a distance or drove right by people who were using them. I know they have successfully phased out gas-powered equipment in other cities. Key Biscayne, Florida, I think they gave residents 6 months to make the transition, and I'm just hoping we can explore educating our residents, and hopefully they will understand just how detrimental the leaf blowers are, and that the initial investment of getting battery-powered equipment may seem costly, but they are going to save money over time. So just hope we can pursue this issue. Thank you.
Thank you. Michelle, you are up, and Jay Simons on deck.
Good evening, Council. I'm Michelle Ellison, resident of Ojai. Don't have a lot to share this evening other than to say thank you for agendizing this topic. It is a reflection of your interest in taking action on climate and reducing our emissions. It really has been surprising for me to learn the contribution that landscaping equipment, gas-powered landscaping equipment, it's really a surprisingly potent source of GHG emissions and driving climate change. So I really appreciate you taking action, at least bringing it up for discussion this evening. I'm in favor, certainly, of moving away from gas-powered equipment and to electrifying equipment. Not only would it help on the climate front, but our local air quality. We all know that That's a challenge for us here in the valley, so it would help with our local air quality and for the workers who are using these pieces of equipment on a daily basis, their health's at stake. So I think from a health perspective, that'd be beneficial. One thing I just read, which was again surprising, the California Air Resources Board reports that pollution from gas-powered gardening equipment will exceed that from all the passenger cars in the state by the year 2020. So, that's just a crazy report. So thank you for this. Appreciate it.
Okay, thank you, Michelle. Jay, Simon, and Sherry Ann Kate on deck.
Good evening, council and staff. Thank you for giving us this opportunity to input. And I join the others in applauding you for the decision in July for declaring a climate emergency. And then, following on pursuing policies and regulations that will seek to mitigate our contributions for this serious problem. And this is something that we really need to address now because we're the ones who can do it, because we want to leave a livable and lovable Ojai for our future generations. So I urge the council to develop and implement a citywide ordinance that will permanently ban all small displacement gas-powered equipment. Science has shown that these are, as other people have said, a major contributor to our air pollution and hence our air quality. And then there are now good electric alternatives. And so just 2 additional comments. First, the electrical replacements should have a low noise requirement, as some of the current plug-in units are extremely loud, and the pitch is so irritating. I know that the first person who, when we came in, was speaking about the noise, and it definitely is a subjective thing, but it is definitely a problem. We have our next door neighbor who doesn't use a gas powered anymore, but the electric one is very loud and very irritating. And second, enforcement is really a key, as I think Sharon said, that she encounters gas-powered leaf blowers all the time. So, and we have experienced the same thing. So I would say that we need to figure out an effective method of enforcement and then implement it. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Jay. Sherry Ann Kate?
I too want to thank you for putting this on the agenda. We know that the county's draft general plan update is pretty unacceptable in terms of what they want to allow in the Ojai Valley. So putting this on the agenda, you're showing that we're walking our talk, and we want to do something about our air quality. So a few things I wanted to mention have been mentioned already, but battery-powered versus plug-in electric. Battery-powered is just so much more advanced technology and quieter. Again, these plug-in leaf blowers they're shrill, it's a horrific din. There's an article in the Atlantic magazine this month about once you hear that, you cannot edit it out. It won't go away. It's just, so I think the reason why they use them is because they're less expensive, but they probably are going to be more expensive having to replace them constantly than if they just start with battery power, forget the plug-in electric. The noise ordinance is the current home of the leaf blower ordinance, and I suggest you move that part of the noise ordinance into this new ordinance. So, when let's say somebody comes and they want to start a new business, a landscape maintenance business, all of that information is in one ordinance instead of looking around all over the place. There's a handout, which I'll give to the clerk, that the city created, and it's about the leaf blower ordinance, and it needs to be revised because there's one general omission on there, and that is it doesn't mention that you cannot blow particulate matter onto the adjacent properties. That's not on here, so that needs to be included. And then lastly, code enforcement. An ordinance that's not enforced is worse than any ordinance at all. And why? Because it teaches people that no one's going to make sure that they comply with the ordinance. We have ordinances on the books now. We all know that everyone, the residents, the merchants, the tourists, everyone is ignoring Airbnb, parking, signage, noise, signage, the little sandwich board signs that are all over downtown. Okay, everybody's, Ojai has a dubious reputation for just looking the other way. I'd encourage you, when you do your 2020 budget, to beef up the code enforcement budget. Let's mean it when we have an ordinance instead of just looking the other way. This whole thing with ordinance enforcement is an issue that's not going away. Thank you.
Thank you, Sherry Ann. Okay, those are all the cards I have. What is the council's pleasure?
I have a couple more things to add, Mayor.
Randy?
So, this was one of the low-hanging fruits to start out with regarding our resiliency here in Ojai. And, I've talked to a number of gardeners, and they're obviously not for this. They see the monetary impact versus the benefit for the community. And I understand that. That's why we started out with this as something small, not something grand. So there's other aspects of this that we went through with the leaf blower ordinance originally, and that was licensing, training, trying to set up some type of a buyback. So again, I'd like to see those addressed when it comes back. And I think the most important, we do have a member in the community who is, if we can get it out there, who is willing to help all of these landscape maintenance companies actually transition from what they have, their two-stroke and their four-stroke, to an electric by giving them a limited or a reduced interest fee on purchasing equipment through them. So when that comes through to fruition, we'll bring that to council to let everyone know. But that is in the works right now, so that we can at least demonstrate some compassion for the individuals that are actually in this business and that will be monetarily impacted by this transition. But the reality is we have to transition. And again, I'm 100% behind this. And I think how we do it has to be, again, with licensing, it has to be with training, and it has to be with enforcement. It's just that simple. I agree, if you have something on the books and you don't want to enforce it, then why do it? And also increasing the area that we're actually, again, originally we limited the impacts of the leaf blower, and now we're willing to expand it because I think the community is 100% behind it. So we're talking also commercial entities right now. I'd like to see us start with that and then come back in 6 months and actually look at the community as a whole. I don't think it's fair that the homeowner can have one of these pieces of equipment and a commercial entity having to, change theirs out. I think as a community as a whole that we're going to be better off if we all do this together.
Wait, I didn't understand what you said. I thought you said, I agree we should all do it together. I thought you said something different. What did you say?
I said this is, we're starting out, again, the low-hanging fruit is commercial businesses, not the entire community. So
You're saying you do all of them? Residents and?
No, just the opposite. Commercial means anyone that has a business license, conducting business, landscape maintenance in the city of Ojai is going to have to transition to electric.
But why not residents?
I think at this time that we want to start out and see how it works and then work our way to residents.
Okay.
If council wants to throw residents in it,
I do.
I'd be willing to listen to that discussion.
Okay, Bill?
Yeah.
One reason that I tend to agree with Councilperson Francina on everybody, that makes enforcement easier.
Yeah.
The simpler the rules, the easier it is. That's relevant to enforcement. And I think that's also where if we could find some grant funding for buybacks, both residential and commercial, it would be, there might be some money out there. I mean, there was money for the city to do it, and we could look at that. I want to concur with everything you say, except I think we ought to look at, the fact that if we do everything at one time with the right displacement limit, with the right phase-in period, it makes enforcement a lot. Just think about that aspect of it when it comes back for discussion. Two more things I want to make a couple of comments about. One is that the reason that I have been pushing for the issue about the fuel is that we know that there's going to be a lot more standby generators because of the practices of the red flag outages. And there is a huge difference between liquid fuels and propane and our natural gas in terms of these standby generators, in terms of air pollution. And in fact, if we did adopt something like that, for example, we recently have, we have large installations that are required by their code or by their licensing to have standby generators, as well as what people are going to be opting into because of the situation with Edison. And I think we need to get ahead of that because, the other aspect of propane, besides being very safe in the way it's stored, it doesn't degrade. Diesel degrades, it rots. And I just think that we ought to try to get ahead of what's coming in terms of a lot more standby generators and also having something on the books that, again, APCD is also looking at this. So I just think that, we don't, the thing about standby generators is it's not just when the power is out. They are exercised. They are routinely maintained by exercise. So they're working every, like a half hour, or 2 weeks or something like that. And so that's why, again, it's important to the extent that it's practical that we say, no, you're not going to use high particulate fuels for that. You're going to use, they're still burning a fuel, but a lot cleaner than high particulate fuels. I think we ought to take a serious look at that.
Okay. Mr. Mayor? Oh, can I have a turn?
What?
Yeah, can I have a turn? Is it my turn? We're discussing, right? Okay.
Yes, all you
Okay,
have to
like
do
my-
is, I'll acknowledge, yes,
Yes.
please participate.
Okay, two things I would like to discuss with the rest of the council. On enforcement, if we can identify who is responsible. I recently lived for 6 months. I leased a house, and nobody took responsibility. The homeowner lived in Florida. Property manager said the homeowner hired the gardener. Gardener had the worst, noisiest, most polluting, so I handled it by offering to take care of the leaves and everything myself, so he didn't have to use the leaf blower. But that still left the lawnmower. So we need to discuss that. And then the other piece that I can't emphasize enough is that if you go to the City of Santa Barbara website, right along with the band, with all these bands, they have a water-wise and green gardening practices. Because if we, as a city, educate the gardeners and the homeowners as to the importance, the impact that green gardening practices have on climate change, that would solve a lot of problems. They wouldn't need half these tools would become obsolete if we had different gardening standards. So I would like staff to really look at the Santa Barbara website and have similar water-wise practices, green water-wise practice. Because when you don't, we need to educate people that when you leave the leaves on the ground, the soil absorbs the water more. As we have to, composting and all of that should be part of the education, not just how to use the tools. And then I have one more important thing to say, and this applies to, I believe, to all leaf blowers, because to me, allowing the electric ones is a compromise, okay? Because we need to face that leaf blowers also kill bees, butterflies, insects, plants, and even wildlife, even small birds. These industrial machines explode and then fire up at more than 100 miles per hour and kick up chemicals, fungi, spores, animal fecal matter, molds, diesel soot, allergens, and other toxic substances. And that applies whether the blowers are electric or gas. We need to acknowledge that. And then Matt, there were these, as far as direction for an ordinance, should we go through the points that are outlined? I was thinking that would be a good way, whether or not to ban small, if yes, as far as making it effective, my thinking is that we're at the beginning of a new year, so that would be a good time to send out a letter and start enforcing it possibly in June. That seems reasonable, send the letter and advertise it in the paper, all of that, so that it's a fresh start to the new year. The timing for this, I think, is very good. Those are my thoughts at the moment. Thank you.
Okay. Ryan? I mean Ryan.
Brian, did you have any
Randy.
comments? No, I'm good. Go ahead.
The time has come to get rid of two-stroke engines. I mean, it's pretty straight up and simple. We should have done this council should have done this when they had the chance the last go-around, but I understand it was a difficult question, and I appreciate that the council at least made the move they did. But I think at this point, it's obvious. The enforcement on this is damn near impossible. I had Councilmember Wyrick in my office. This was a few months ago. There was an individual that was using a gas blower on a mixed-use commercial / residential unit that's right next to my office, that's right next to commercial, and where the wind's blowing, you can't really, ultimately, all he's got to do is walk 10 feet, and it's allowed one place, it's not allowed the other, potentially, and the mixed use was brand new, so he didn't really know there was potentially residential, and we're 2 council members, and we were like, what are we going to do? We call somebody, by the time anybody gets here, they're going to be gone. So having consistent enforcement is, I think, absolutely essential. 4-stroke may be something we need to consider. I'd like to know more about that, but I think the time has come that these devices, the electric part of it is ubiquitous. It's just got to happen. And as our rep on the APCD board, I'm happy to work with James, and I'll reach out to the director as well and see what options may be available. If we're going to pass this, there may be some funding available to get people converted over. But it seems, I hate the idea of we have to be cognizant of landscapers' costs, but this is, once I understood on the APCD board how much pollution these tiny little devices create, it is absolutely a no-brainer that they're the low-hanging fruit that needs to get off the market, and we need to clean it up.
So I would move we approve the staff recommendation, inclusive of council comments.
Is there a second?
Well, there's a second on that, but one caveat, the fact.
That from you?
Yes, the
Okay.
second, but this is coming back, so this is not a completed.
No, we're directing
So
them to
we're-
come develop
right,
something.
come back.
And I'd specifically like to say, I'd like to learn a lot more about the generator issue.
Yeah.
I agree with Mr. Wyrick, but we are walking into a new era of how generators are going to be used in our community. We might want to start regulating how they're installed on new constructions,
Right.
because they're probably going to be a ubiquitous part of new construction soon. If Edison has its way, we're going to see that a lot. So that might be something that goes in the building codes. But in the short term, we had multiple fatalities in the counties where power was turned off. Not here, but from respirators and stuff. So we got to figure out a way to balance that. I don't want to be too heavy-handed, but we got to figure out, because that usage is going to be.
So we at least can to mitigate the pollution impacts.
Also, Mayor, Suze, I think your idea on having some form of handout at the counter regarding water-wise, and even organic gardening, however we choose to do that. I just don't want to, reduce this ordinance or complicate this ordinance. I think those two are two separate
Yeah,
issues.
they are,
But
yeah.
I agree with you.
Yeah.
That there should be something at the counter that demonstrates, and again, acknowledges and educates the public on those new conditions.
Yes. I have a question. May I ask it? Do you have enough direction as far as mapping out who's responsible? Whether it's the gardener, the homeowner?
Yeah, so we've held both responsible, and we have tried to put a focus on enforcement recently. I think we've issued, I might be off by 1 or 2, but I think it's been about 12 citations in the last
Whoa.
3 to 4 months. So we are doing it, and one thing I would say is if you're seeing it, call, because we are responding to it. It is challenging to catch everybody.
But I'd like to reiterate that the current city administration has been much more responsive in my personal experience about calls and responding and getting out there and documenting and having some impact. So please, don't be shy. Call it in.
One more point. And can we address the battery versus plug-in? Okay.
In the ordinance, you're saying?
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah.
That's the pitch, that's, some of those are piercing, and while they don't show on the meter, I don't know how you go about doing that, but it seems like,
We'll take a look at that question, I think. Take a look at how to define that piece of it, so it's both air quality and noise quality standards.
Many manufacturers have sound ratings on their equipment.
Well, we didn't pass a noise emergency, but we did pass a climate emergency. So let's make sure we tackle the more important one of those. But let's look into it if there's a way to,
Yeah,
you know,
and the
mitigate it.
principal purpose of this is to reduce the pollution, right? We're talking two-stroke engine because they're dirty and that there's no way to make them clean enough,
Yeah, I
and
know.
still be portable.
And everybody perceive, you know, some of the sound stuff is tough because it's very subjective. People perceive sounds differently. So, but if you guys can come out, if there's anything that is, if we can figure out a way to delineate it, I'd be happy to do it.
I also want to request that you review the recommendations from Steve Colomé, who's not just an air specialist, but also on our climate emergency. So I think you received that also, right? Okay. Yeah.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. I think we've probably talked it as much as we need to for tonight. Is there any objection to the motion? Seeing none, so ordered.
Thanks,
Okay,
everybody.
we will
Thank
now
you. Thank
move.
you.
Wouldn't require anybody bringing their
Thank
leaf
you,
blower to
everybody.
demonstrate this thing.
Your
We're
testimony.
now on item number 5, the quarterly budget.
You know, they got, honestly, the delay they got is pretty, everybody's going this way now. It's, you know,
That's a cue to everybody to leave.
Yeah, that was what they were,
I'm gonna do it eventually too.
high interest, and no one opposed them.
Yeah, it's surprising.
Everyone's for it.
Yeah, tell
Everybody's
the devil in the
So far,
detail.
so far.
No,
Yeah,
I think
it's a
we're-
good start, at least.
I think this is
Well,
going to be
you
huge.
know, I mean, at least turn it into something
And then we'll find ways to help
I
the
think-
partners.
I'll tell you if I had two guys.
Okay, Mr. City Manager.
I talked to them about it, and they just.
Okay, we're still in session, folks. Come on.
Overside barn bear.
Yeah. Okay, James.
Thank you. So we have a first quarter budget update. And as you recall, in June, towards the end of June 2019, which it's crazy, it's 4 months have already passed. But in June of 2019, we adopted a budget that anticipated a $55,000 funding gap on an approximate $10.2 million budget. When we adopted the budget, we all agreed that we would need to stay diligent and provide quarterly updates of the budget status to alert council of any needed changes or budget adjustments. This is the first update. We anticipated that this first update in October, because it was only 3 months into the year, would be a pretty basic update, and it is. The good news at this point is that 3 months into the new fiscal year, 3 to 4 months into the new fiscal year, we don't see any alarm bells to ring. Revenues are in line with where they would be expected. There's a slight decrease, but it's mostly due to a delayed payment that we are expecting to receive. Expenditures are also in line with where we expect to be. There's a slight decrease, but it's mostly due to the timing of a payment that we will need to pay. So both revenues and expenditures are in line with where they typically would be. And at this point, we don't see any need to make any adjustment yet. We would expect to do a mid-year review in January of 2020. And at that time, we'll have substantially more data on both revenues and expenditures, and we will expect to have more changes or possible adjustments at that time.
Okay. Any questions of the city manager? Bill?
It's really being driven home to me how important, and I didn't realize this when I first took office, you know, when I first term, how important it is for cash reserve towards managing these ongoing gaps between the revenue and expenditures.
Mhm.
I had no idea when I first took office in the first term how much of a lag our revenues are.
Yeah.
And if you're a city without cash reserves, you're going and your interest expenses are higher than
Yep.
they would otherwise need to be. This really underscores the importance of having a healthy cash reserve, not just for emergencies, but for the ongoing issue. of
Cash flow
financing
issues.
the
Right.
revenue lags. I had no idea how bad it was.
Government's a bad cash flow business.
Well,
First
yeah,
quarter,
and
we're usually $1 million to the negative.
Yeah, and the problem is magnified in small towns because, you know, a little blip in the economy or a drag back on, payables or collectibles, if you don't have any money in the bank, you're broke, you know.
And so it's not just the money, the earnings you get from the investments in your reserve, it's also the avoided interest expense of short-term financing
Right.
Very true.
And the choices that you have when, you know, I won't bring them up tonight, but there are circumstances where you end up in a negotiation where maybe a big taxpayer suddenly decides, well, okay, maybe we don't remit until we settle this. You lose, you know, that's a lot of leverage on a small town. So,
Mayor, motion to receive and file?
Yep. Okay, we have a motion to receive and file. Moved and seconded. Any further discussion? Good work, James. Thank you. Okay, we are now on item number 6, and that is.
Did you get? Now I want to know. Did you guys get to? Did everybody here? Did 2 of you attend Matt's seminar? Or
I didn't get there in time because of traffic.
I understand. I did provide.
It was Wednesday.
I heard Matt had a hot dog. I heard Matt had a hot dog stand set up. And,
No, we had a whole
truck
thing.
out front.
All about it. Tell us everything.
So I provided a presentation to
Had
the
a
league-
jolly jump too. Didn't you?
Oh yeah, we did. Yeah, and tamales for everyone. I provided a presentation to the League of Cities at the conference last week, which some of you attended, on this exact topic on sidewalk vending, and it was a good discussion it was a presentation, less a discussion in the full group, but discussions afterwards, looking at how cities across the state are dealing with sidewalk vending. So if I could launch into a 5-minute expose, really 3 minutes. What we have before you is a term sheet for a sidewalk
put him
vending.
on the lights if he's going to do 3 minutes.
Yeah.
Now we want to see your recreation.
Well, that'd be
your-
15, 20 minutes.
You're
I'll spare you
eating
the
up
full.
some of his time. Come
Yeah,
on.
right.
Go,
So-
Matt.
And Matthew, everyone's giddy right now because look at the time.
I know.
I got work to do.
Y'all know we're going to be here another hour and a half. Don't lie.
Get home.
Let's set a record and get this
Right.
done. Okay.
So
Exactly.
what's before you is a term sheet to take our existing kind of 2 or 3 sections and adopt an ordinance governing sidewalk vending. The key is that sidewalk vending is literally on the sidewalk. It's persons with a table and some chairs, or just pushing a cart along or a cooler along. It's not food trucks. It's not vending from a vehicle. It's just on the sidewalk. And it was under last year's Senate Bill 946, given special legislative protection that really came out of LA politics.
Yeah.
And it is now fully decriminalized. So the 2 pieces of our code that we can't enforce right now, and we haven't, of course, are criminalizing sidewalk vending. Instead, it becomes solely a civil matter, and the statute provides authority for the city to adopt an affirmative set of regulations within some rules and bounds. And our recommendation is to get direction from the council to draft a term sheet, or an ordinance rather, based on the term sheet, to regulate sidewalk vending, set to be both strict but also reasonable, and reflect that vending is appropriate in some locations, kind of portions of our downtown core, areas with adequately wide sidewalks, areas where it can fit, and not in other places. And in particular, to ban sidewalk vending that is stationary, that is someone fixed in a particular location in residential zones, and set some hours and operations restrictions in the rest of the residential zones. In addition, we can adopt some rules, for example, in the arcade, in that limited width area, subject to a variety of existing pedestrian constraints. I think the record exists to just straight ban sidewalk vending within the arcade. And we're taking a look at the arcade plaza and what rules could be set there regarding appropriate vending location. So the ask is to direction to prepare an ordinance for your review at an upcoming meeting. Thank you.
Okay. I would. We have one card here before we take. Is there any other questions of the city manager? Jamie, thank you for.
Hey.
Thanks for hanging out with us.
My pleasure. Jamie Fleming, Ojai Chamber of Commerce. First, I want to let you know that we work very closely with Javier. As some of you have attended any of our mixers, we have actually had presentations from him to our members who have been certified. We publicize it in all of our email blasts, and we're taking it seriously ourselves. I even tried to get my own office building solarized, and that isn't quite because of the rooftops, but at least we're already trying to take steps in the right direction on that. So I want to make sure you knew that. I had a lot more prepared, but I want to clarify if there are options to actually limit where it can be. I can kind of address more of that from the Chamber of Commerce's point of view.
So yeah, we have within reasonable bounds, with the appropriate findings, the city can limit vending in certain areas if we can show that it's rooted in protecting an objective health, safety, and welfare concern. For example, pedestrian overcrowding or preservation of a natural resource. For example, in the back of the arcade plaza, what's what I want? paved areas, preventing vending anywhere that can't adequately accommodate trash. Or for the coastal communities, you can ban vending in the sand. That kind of, if it's connected to a resource or connected to a particular situation where are preserving or protecting.
Okay.
And we'd be happy to take further comments from the chamber on the ordinance if direction is given to prepare one.
Yeah.
Right. There are a couple of perceptions. First, I don't have to tell you how fragile our commerce is as it is. Another perception that sometimes I'm constantly having to be amazed to quell is our retail store owners mostly aren't wealthy. We have to learn to differentiate between landlord and a retailer who's a business person trying to rent a space and do business. And so we have so many of our retailers already who are just on loans. They're trying to go month to month. Some are still recovering from the Thomas Fire, as you probably are aware from the EDC's presentations. I also get surprised how a lot of people just think, oh, it just is not that expensive, and why are they charging such high prices for our food and products? But if you do the simple math, and I'll just take one of the smallest stores downtown, probably starts around $3,500 right now with the going rates just to rent it. Then on top of that, you have one, let's say, minimum wage employee. So now we're about $6,000. Then you have your insurances, your employment insurance, and you also have your utilities. Now we're at maybe $7,000, $7,500, and that's to turn the lights on with an employee. So a lot of people don't realize how many T-shirts you'd have to sell to start covering just that nut before you start making a profit. So I want to make sure we're all remembering how precious our retailers are, and that I love the spirit of some of the bill, and I think it's important to also show some respect of the challenges of doing business also in Ojai. Having said that, one of the key areas where I want to address this is, if you're a retailer, your most valuable asset you have as a store is your storefront, the window. We all know the term, window shopping, right? All you have to do is join me at my table and watch the people stroll, and they look in the window. You see the little conversation, then you go, and then you see them go in. Now we have a customer, and our retailers actually maybe has a chance to make a sale to make his livelihood. So it might not always be a safety issue, but I'm just imploring us to try and also, besides the spirit of this bill, which is respect, I also think we need to respect our store owner. And that's, if there could be wording or a way to protect these store owners to having things put in front of their storefronts, so people cannot use the one asset that our store owners have, which is the window display.
And what they're paying the high rent for.
That's what they're paying the rent for.
Especially for a vendor that's not paying the plaza maintenance fee.
Right.
So I guess you're kind of getting my drift. I think we have
and unfortunately, we have to be a bit careful. The legislation did directly rule out any regulation that's rooted in economic competition concerns, but we do retain the full panoply of safety, pedestrian access, pedestrian overcrowding, natural resource protection. We retain a variety of other tools that I think can accomplish the council's overall goals.
In response, is it similar to speech, like a reasonable time and manner?
Similar, but curtailed a bit.
It's not as broad, obviously.
It's not as broad as the standard time, place, manner
mean,
analysis.
if we cordoned off, let's say hypothetically, just to throw this out there, if we said, all right, we're going to make this small section of Libby Plaza the only place where up to 3 vendors can get a permit to be able to do this, would we be able to limit them to just that area because it was reasonable and they still had a place to do it?
Provided we made the right findings, I think that could be structured. We can take a look at that.
So
as
we
an
can
option.
limit it to some area. It's not like they have all the sidewalks. If we at least made some area available, we could keep them. If in order to keep the plaza free of vendors, we had to allocate some space to it, that is a strategy as well.
Within a defined area, yeah, that approach can be adopted.
Okay.
And we're happy to take a look at that as we take the term sheet and develop a full ordinance.
Yeah. Now, we don't have any application. We don't have any business application, I think,
Yeah,
for
we don't have
sidewalk.
Excuse me.
No, I don't believe
just
so.
one question, are we done? Is Jamie done?
What?
Is Jamie done?
Well, I had
You
one
had
more
more
quick,
question? Go
One more
ahead.
quick thing, and I don't know, again, if you have flexibility on what the cost of a permit is, but to me, after explaining to you just the cost to do business in a town of this type, I'm hoping that the permit fees can also reflect that kind of cost of doing business here. That's my only second point.
Unfortunately, perhaps not unfortunately, our permit fees can, in this context, reflect the city's full cost of overseeing this program and of providing the services. It has to be tied to the city's costs, but those costs can be full recovery of the city's entire cost of the program.
Well, I didn't know if it's even possible to rate like the arcade or downtown. Obviously, that's the most expensive, and work your way. And I'll leave it to you, but I'm just saying there might be ways to
I can
work
have one
this.
more. Jamie, I think it might be a good idea to talk to some of the merchants, some of the restaurateurs in town, and remind them that, they can look at this as, oh my God, there might be another vendor competing with me in front of my business. It also means that they can take their business outside and become the vendor. And that may be something that they need to look at as it being a positive, where they can embrace that and maybe make it something to add people to come in, and not just simply something that somebody they don't know is going to be competing with them against.
I'm hoping that we can still come up with a way to preserve their storefronts without encouraging all the stores to stick stuff in the arcade and walk.
Well, and I think the arcade itself is certainly an area where we can make the appropriate findings to simply bar sidewalk vending within the arcade itself. The rest of the city we have to take a look at.
Just a minute, yeah, okay. Yeah. Susan?
Okay, so for example, could the ice cream shop have an ice cream cart outside of their store?
If it wasn't otherwise prohibited, yes.
Yeah, rather than having a
Well,
competing.
And it'd have to be attached to a generator, probably. I mean, that's a whole nother issue.
That's true. I forgot. Well, no, they could ice or, they
Have
wouldn't,
about a-
I mean, it could be something they wouldn't necessarily do all day, but if they see a ton of people out in the park, for example, and they have a permit, they could put a cart outside so that the families don't have to bring the kids inside and tearing through the store, whatever.
Right, with the appropriate permits and in compliance with the rules, yes, that could be
That
done.
feels
Maybe
very
you could sell
Ojai,
water
Yeah.
at Libby Park, something like that. You could sell water on the street as well.
Right. I mean,
Yeah.
in more metropolitan Los Angeles, you see every weekend through the parks, significantly sized carts that are full of ice with the fruit being sold, chopped up, the chopped up fruit carts. It's quite common, and they're there all day with no power. but-
Okay, well, we aren't going to design it tonight, I hope.
No, the
because it
idea
would
is
not-
the direction.
yeah, we just want to give the go-ahead that we do want such a regulation, and I think the staff is now sensitized to our concerns, both for the competition as well as the obstruction
Oh,
of
we
the
have a couple
safety
of-
issues.
We have a couple other questions too.
Yeah,
Okay.
and I think we have another speaker.
Yeah, well, we don't have a card.
No, we don't. So,
Can you fill out a card?
so here's the,
Chair.
so have we turned, the public comment section is done? Okay, so, one of the questions that I wanted to relate to regarding Jamie is, if we're gonna, permit this activity, again, can a store owner get a permit to be a vendor outside of his store?
Yes.
That'd be the first thing. The second thing, I wanted to go back to Sousa's comment. If I owned the ice cream shop and someone came in front of my shop selling ice cream, that's not Ojai.
No.
That would really disturb me and really piss me off. And I think that
Particularly if you're the ice cream guy. I mean,
Yeah.
they store,
I'm just trying to
renting
say
the
is,
space, yeah.
one of the
Doug would
things
not
is-
like it.
One of the things that sold me on Ojai when I discovered this little community was the ice cream shop and their lemon chiffon ice cream. So I sure don't want to ever lose that opportunity, but.
Yeah,
I
the
think
street
those are
vendor may have some good
so
numbers,
those are the
Shimon.
concerns, and then one of the things that I brought up is I did ask for an assessment of the VMU, of all the sidewalks where these vendors could possibly set up shop. So I'd like to make sure that we have that information before we make any judgments and then the last thing is waste. Who's responsible for removing their waste?
Yes.
Is that something that they bag and leave on the sidewalk for us? Or is that something that we can actually put into the ordinance about who's responsible and accountable for that?
Yeah, we can require adequate waste disposal and define what that means to ensure that the vendors bear their own waste. They don't just dump it in the public trash cans.
And we can
then
require
the
recycling, right?
Yes.
And then the last question is on the regulating of the VMU and the residential neighborhoods. How is that going to work out regarding, is it a residential ordinance or is it a commercial business ordinance that is going to be applicable to that area? So I think that's a concern that I have.
Right, that's a line drawing exercise that we can, I think, define certainly in the residential areas of the VMU and maybe to draw what those are. Those areas, stationary sidewalk vending would be barred. It would have to be mobile and wouldn't have to meet those requirements.
Okay, well, let us not try to design it tonight. The city attorney is obviously one of the experts at this point, such as expertise exists, because he was the guest lecturer at the league. So I think we've got the best guy on the job. You understand that we're not interested in, we want to comply with the law, but not to encourage the activity in a way that's not safe. And one of the things we have going in this community
Are they
is
compromises our existing businesses?
right. Yeah, one of the things that we have going for us in this city, if it's a sidewalk vendor, we don't have many sidewalks. So,
right, as we know, we
it
literally have
immediately
trees instead of
restricts,
sidewalks.
and you can't obstruct the public's ability to pass. So with those as the guidelines, when you come back with whatever it is, we can then sort of tailor it to what we think is most appropriate.
And then, Mayor, I just had, I made some notes on here. I just had one last question. Regarding a individual driving and parking in front of a business in a van, unloads his vending machine or his desk or whatever, okay, is that vehicle allowed to be there all day? That's a concern. And then the other concern is, we can't sell, as far as our public safety, do we have access to that 36 inches from the curb for our citizens that are pulling up and actually using these businesses? Do they have access to open a door properly without a vendor being in that 36-inch window?
Well, and we can maintain that area, and we could even widen it to 48 as the standard disability access width.
I have a question of city attorney. When you say sidewalk, that would include, for example, a prime corner would be the corner of Matilaha and North Signal, where there's no longer a tree and there's a bench. I could just see that's a great space for a vending, for a cart. That's considered a sidewalk, that little area.
That's a sidewalk, yes.
A sidewalk doesn't have to be where people are walking, it's corners, all of that.
It's any of the sidewalks, any of the flat concrete surfaces on which you can walk that are adjacent to a street within the public right-of-way.
But for the park, it doesn't have to be on a sidewalk, right?
Well, and most cities have banned vending that isn't on paved areas.
Okay.
With the exception of Los Angeles.
We know where
allows it.
Sousa's churro stand will be.
Well, I was going to do vegan hot dogs.
Those are called, I call those churros.
No, seriously. I could do that on Sunday morning or Sunday afternoon.
Gluten-free churros?
Yeah.
Okay. Come on, guys.
I have the sense of the council's goals, and I will work with those goals in mind as I draft an ordinance.
The only
Thank you.
Matt, if I'd like to know if they can be in front of the businesses or like if you have your own business, whether we can limit them to be if you own the business, if you want to put one in front. That's the only other question I'd have.
That is directly outlawed.
Okay, it is.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's outlawed?
Limiting the vending in front of a business to that business is directly outlawed.
Okay.
But it doesn't prohibit them.
No, that vendor can be one of any vendor in front of that area.
But if we prohibited it in the
whole area.
in the arcade, you couldn't say if you own the business, you could still do it.
No, it would have to be a blanket
Okay,
prohibition.
that's what I want to know. Thank you.
Okay. If there's consensus to move forward with the draft, then I will show you so.
Okay, please do, unless there's an objection. Is there an objection? We don't need any more discussion.
I object that we can't be flexible and allow a commissioner or as a public person.
We had the public comment. Everybody knows. We're now just debating. I'm sure that Ray will share his thoughts with all of us before this is done. We don't need to do it tonight, and that is my feeling. But of course, you folks have the right to override it if they.
I would like to override it, but I don't know how the rest of the council feels.
It doesn't sound like you have a second to that, so.
Sorry.
Okay, so you understand the
Yes.
sensitivity of where we want to get, and then once we see the draft, we can then work, either loosen it up or tighten it up within the law, of course. And I assume that our attorney will give us the tightest thing we can do under the law.
That direction is quite
And we'll
clear.
try to come up with some creative solutions to protect our own.
I have one more question, sorry. Does this go back to the planning commission?
The intention is to structure this in, I think, Title IV, so that it would be just the council.
Okay.
If you wished, it could go to the commission,
They
but
got-
that
No,
may.
I'm
I'm
not a
just
land use
asking.
issue.
I don't
They got
wish
enough to
it.
do.
I don't wish, I'm
Yeah.
just asking.
Okay,
Yeah.
so
Title
it'll
IV.
be Title IV. Okay, good. So ordered. Thank you. We are now to staff, or, pardon me, council reports.
None, Mayor.
None?
I don't have anything, but I will say a lot of people have asked me. My dad was in a car accident yesterday. He is okay. He was in Ventura. He was going to the courthouse, and there was someone who ran a red light and took out the entire front of his car. The car looks horrible, but he is reasonably okay given the way it looks. He did have some small broken bones in his hand, which aren't good, but past all the other x-rays and MRIs and stuff were negative, but he's pretty beat up and sore, and that's it. But if anybody is listening, I've had a lot of people who cared. I appreciate it. He does as well from everyone. He's doing okay, and he'll be back in action here soon.
Oh, great. I'm glad he got through that. Okay, let me just hit one brief thing, and this maybe go along with some of the things that Mr. Powers and some of us have communicated over the internet. While we talk about small engines, we talk about air pollution, we talk about all these things, and then we have sort of a kind of an unrevisited festival schedule on everything, including our own Ojai Day, where we have shuttles and things that are operating on some of these small engines. The noise, the people that are now participating in some of these things aren't from here. We talk about health food or healthy food, and there seems to be less of that. It becomes sort of peddler's fare. It seems like part of our filter that we should be looking at all this stuff is to maybe take a look at it. It's nice that people want to come here and use Ojai as the draw, but we got to somehow, blend it with these other things that we're doing. So here's an example, and I'm not the scientist, but it says, it turns out that the idling of a gas vehicle for 5 minutes each day can emit as much as 25 pounds of air pollutants of carbon dioxide per year. When you think of the number of vehicles and even the buses and things that come to town, that all goes to parking and general planning. So anyway, that's my little pitch. Susan, you have a report?
And just along the lines of that, I just wanted to, I have several things I want to ask about, but talking about Ojai Day, because we've had all this feedback that we need to make Ojai Day much greener, less polluting, more local. Is that something that needs to go on a future agenda? What's the best way
I
to
would
address
suggest,
it?
Susan, if you're willing to do it, for you and me to meet with the city manager, run
Yes.
through this and see what opportunities there are and then maybe put it back on a council agenda. at a
Yes, I would
future
love
date.
to do
There
that.
is generally an annual report on Ojai Day. That might be the good time to. have
Right,
that.
yeah, there was also the suggestion that this was a fundraiser, and that raises a bunch of questions too, as to, I don't see the profit and loss statement on these things. I don't know under Prop 218 or whatever it is, what.
Yeah, we can report back on that. That was one comment. I agree with the sentiment, but we typically don't do this because it's profitable. We do it as a community service.
Exactly.
And if it was for profit, it would have been canceled a long time ago.
Right, because we tend to lose money on our enterprise activities. Bill, report from the council?
Yeah, I just wanted to go over real short, and I'll fill in later highlights from attending the league conference. A couple of things that I think the sessions were very interesting. James, I saw James in and out of some of those. We were all trying to stay awake with no sleep and everything. But anyway, Walnut Creek, for example, gave an excellent session, examples of affordable housing. They're leveraging about every dollar of city money into $6 to $7 from outside funding for grants and syndicating tax credits and all that kind of thing. It was a really interesting ratio, especially to dovetail with what we heard tonight. So there's a lot there to mine, and I'm hoping that we're all going to gain some expertise in how to do that for housing. there was a really good session about green manufacturing and the extent to which there is support networks and funding to bring in manufacturing to kind of dovetail with what I'm hoping the Chamber is going to be able to accomplish with broadband access in order to help diversify our economic base. And I'm not talking just about cannabis. Okay.
Or him, yeah. Right.
Yeah. I assume you've been in Camarillo recently.
I have.
It doesn't smell right.
Well, not as bad as I expected, but it got my attention.
Yeah.
For only a couple miles.
Yeah. Anyway.
That's all we are.
Just a few more minutes. The session on ADUs made it very clear how ineffective citations and fines are. They're just a cost of doing business. I asked specifically for short-term rentals. I'm sorry, ADUs. I misspoke. For short-term rentals, and about enforcement of short-term rentals. I asked a question, just to be clear, what are the legal pitfalls in running stings on short-term rentals? And I basically said, as long as you're not entrapping or soliciting, you're free to do it. And we've talked about it, and it just sort of reinforced the fact, listening to that session, that we really need to be looking at an appropriately structured sting operation, I think, in this town, if we're going to be serious about enforcement, because, yeah, fines and citations are just cost of doing business. There's so much money involved. The California Village movement, I knew nothing about. I think we ought to consider joining. It's a statewide movement to focus on senior support, age-friendly cities. I think we have a lot to both contribute as well as to learn. I'm going to be circulating information on that. I think it's $500 a year for cities to join this movement. I think you might want to consider it.
And what is the movement?
It's called the California Village Movement, or Village California Movement, and it's specifically designed to put together resources, both voluntary, but basically in the entire civic space, both government and voluntary nonprofits, to support senior aging in place, active senior engagement in terms of the community activity and community life. It's an interesting growing phenomenon. I'll circulate some information on it.
Is Del Webb Sun City or what?
That's exactly what it's not.
Yeah,
it's
right.
like exactly not out there warehousing. It's seniors embedded and incorporated into the sinews of life in the community, which we already do pretty good at.
Yeah, I would say that's one of the complaints some of the young people have about us seniors.
I know.
There are too many of us.
I was kind of joking around. I'm in my mid-60s, and I feel like a baby around here. But it was an interesting. I think it might be something we ought to consider joining.
Do we need to put it on the agenda?
Well, I don't. I'm just doing council member report.
Okay.
But and then I don't want to bog down. And then also was interesting on SB2 that we adopted tonight. They were expecting 500 applications. So far, they've gotten 90. Wow. They're begging for people. They're begging applications to give money away. And I was thinking maybe they were intimating that maybe if they didn't get enough applications, they might give more money to people that want it, beyond their $160,000 that we're kind of entitled to. So it's just something that I think was very interesting. So it was a valuable conference, and those were the kind of the highlights of the sessions I went to.
Okay, thank you, Bill.
I had one other thing. I did go to the MAC meeting last night. It was my first time going to it. And they were discussing I hate the term, but the lane or the road diet. I think it's just a stupid term. But so they gave a presentation on what they're trying to do for that corridor.
Is this the one down in Oakview?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it was a nice presentation. One of the comments that I thought was interesting, one of the MAC people asked how many people sitting there were probably 20, 30 of us, or actually lived in Oakview, and there was only 3 hands that said they were. So again, I thought it was interesting that there were more people that lived outside of Oakview, more concerned with what's going on in Oakview.
But part of the answer is if you live outside Oakview, it'd be easier to do business in Oakview. If it wasn't such a pain to stop.
Without opening this up, I just thought it was again an initial discussion. Obviously, I'm not a fan of it. In fact, my comment was that they should be thinking of adding lanes, not reducing lanes. But that was just my residential thing.
But this is not a fair characterization. I went to
That's a real campaign slogan.
The previous meetings on this had tons of Oakview residents.
So all I'm trying to say is it was a good presentation. They're in the initial stage. They still have a ton of planning, They have no idea how they're gonna fund it. So there's a multitude of things that are on the table for them to look at, but it was an excellent conceptual drawing of what that community could look like.
Okay.
Great.
So that brings us to the city manager.
Yeah, I just wanted to note a couple of things. We are working tomorrow morning on finalizing a general plan update proposal that we are hoping to bring to the next agenda. It's one of the biggest projects we will probably undertake in the next couple of years, so we're working on getting it right. But we are hoping to get that done for the next agenda on, I think it's November 12th. And then I just earlier mentioned that we had the first meeting of the Climate Steering Committee last week, and we've scheduled a couple more to develop the recommendation to council on the makeup and procedures for the Climate Committee. And so we have that coming probably in the November or December council meeting.
Can I ask a question about the climate?
Uh-huh.
Can we have the emails of all the members?
Yeah, I can send those to
Can you
you.
provide that to us?
Mhm.
Thank you.
Okay, Bill?
I'm sorry, can you
James-
clarify that?
The contact information.
Oh, I thought you wanted their emails from how their discussions. You want copies of those?
No, you wanted
No.
your email
No, I just wanna
contact,
be
yeah, how to
able
get a hold of them.
I have 3 of them. I don't have Brian and Jim. Is his name Jim?
Yes.
Your appointee, yeah. Okay, thank you.
James, something I've been hearing more from constituents as well as personally experiencing, it really came home the other day when I saw, and this is about the timing on pedestrian crossing at Signal and Ojai Avenue. It is really short in terms of crossing Ojai Avenue, to the point where if somebody is disabled at all or in a wheelchair, it is turning red on them before they may have a chance to get across. Okay. And I don't know what's involved in just maybe adding a 15 seconds or so when that pedestrian crossing button is crossed. I know that Caltrans would have has the jurisdiction on that, but I'm increasingly seeing the light turn red on people that are to a degree disabled when they're trying to cross, because it is so fast.
Is it crossing Ojai Avenue?
It's crossing Ojai Avenue, crossing in the direction of Signal on either side. The time is really short for anybody with any issue at all in terms of getting across before it's turning red.
Okay.
And I don't know if how that gets looked at, but
We'll follow up on it, and then I'm sure Caltrans weighs in too, but we'll loop back around and let everybody know what the status of it is.
Mayor, can I add to that?
Probably when they press the button.
It seems to me one of the discussions we had with the attorney in closed session brought up the fact that there's some joint use share. Who actually sets the time on that? We or Caltrans?
I would assume that is a Caltrans one being set.
But we could request
Right.
Yeah.
review and an extension. I mean, it's just I saw a person, who was, physically,
Right.
challenged, and they were literally in the middle of the street when it turned red, and they started over. They started walking right when it turned green. Yeah, I'm just talking, there's some, I know they can program it to it's a little extended time when the button's pushed over when it's not.
Okay.
I just think it's something to look at.
Yeah, we
And,
should.
Because we have had a fatality there, not recently, but it's.
And then,
We'll reach out to Caltrans.
have we gotten any response from is Greg following up with Reno on the offer of having the emergency sign at Boku?
I actually met with them on Friday, and we are working on hammering out a proposal that works for both of us.
Okay.
Because obviously they are concerned with the design, but they're really interested in the idea, and we're going to work with them on seeing what would work. So.
And then, would it be appropriate, I know that our chamber director has some thoughts on enhancing the, how we schedule and route our shuttles to meet, there's some issues, maybe we could optimize that. Would it be appropriate for us to direct Jamie to speak with Greg Grant about that issue at all in terms of
The,
from a business point of view?
Are we talking about the trolleys?
The trolley.
Oh, okay.
The trolley acting as a shuttle. Would it be appropriate for him to speak with Greg about that or not?
Yeah, we could start the conversation. We're talking about, we have limits on adding new routes.
Well, we're talking about, for example, the direction of route. For example, one issue is when we pick people coming in to town, let's say from the Ojai Valley Inn, it's a direct, yet when they return, they've got to go to Miners Oaks before they get back. In other words, so it doesn't really,
on purpose.
Encourage.
We wanted to see.
Well, I
Miners Oaks.
understand, but
Yeah.
just a short.
We can have those discussions.
It's not about adding, that's about how we do the
Yeah.
routing and scheduling.
Yeah, and it's probably
Okay.
something that would ultimately come back to council, but we can have those
Okay.
discussions then.
And also, at Ojai Day, they had a booth for the Children's Memorial effort in our, and they're really looking for that facility support that could offer them with a lease modification.
Yeah, okay.
Okay, thank you.
That one is on me, I'll get it.
Okay.
Okay, so we're on,
Are we on future?
agenda items?
So, we're on consent items. I don't know how to,
Are we on future
I
agenda?
don't know how to properly say it, but it's interesting Nick brought it up, which has been on my mind for a while. I think we need a sleepover, or we need a retreat with the school board. We need to do
something.
We need to do, there is, and I hear it all the time in the community, that right now, they don't have a sense that we're aligned in our vision for this community. And it's sad, because I like to think we are, but obviously, if the perception, which is real, that is out there is that we're not, then we need to do something about it. So I'd like to ask, we either can agendize it, or we could just ask the city manager to maybe conduct some type of a conversation with the school board director, and then set up a retreat for sometime next year, and we can bridge this divide. And I think the divide is mostly about the school property. But I still think it's something that we need to do as not a 3-day event or not a 20-day event, but it could be something as simple as getting together for a day, making sure we're all in the same facility for a dinner, and then meeting the next day. So it's something real simple, something that we could do in town, but it's something that needs to be done. We are, the perception is we're not on the same page, the council and the school
Okay,
board.
but what we're doing at this stage in the meeting is taking items that somebody wants to put on our agenda
So that's
next
what I'm saying, we
meeting.
can either agendize that as a discussion, and I'd be more than happy to do that. So let's agendize that then.
Yeah, I have problems with that, because I think the difficulty, it's not so much that we are not aligned with the school district, but the school district is trying to monetize the property to generate operating income for the school district. And that runs directly into the general plan, and what are we gonna do down there? Things like parking, signalization, traffic, density. And until somebody from the school district comes up with, well, Hank did before he left. He told us what they needed, and now it's about twice or 3 times what they thought they needed, and there isn't anybody coming back.
Well, all I'm trying to say is those are concerns and issues and problems. The word alignment is entirely different. We need to create an alignment or a vision of this community, and maybe as we do our general plan update, that is something that will happen. But more importantly, if we can just get a consensus that both bodies are in agreement that everything that we do is something in the resiliency, something in that nature. But alignment is entirely different than problem solving. We're not gonna go into that retreat and solve their problem.
I thought what they said at the joint meeting did have us both in alignment with, what you were just, what you described, what you call that, regenerative or sustainability or whatever, all those buzzwords. But the trouble is those generally do not generate profit.
Well, again, two different things, and I don't want to get into their issue about generating money. That's not the focus here.
Okay,
The focus is, I think, Mayor, is the community thinks that we're at odds. And I'd like to see us do something jointly together and come out of it, not with a kumbaya, but just with a statement that says we are aligned on these principles of how this community will move forward in the future. Something that simple, and I think we could do that.
Well, that's the kind of conversation that I'm sure would be very appropriate to the general plan process, and we could make that a priority. Yeah, I would agree with you that is the focal point of the downtown, and if we piecemeal ourselves, we've already changed the center of town pretty much to Montgomery, but without all of the infrastructure and concerns. So, James, you said you'd be back with the general plan, do you think, first meeting in November?
That's the goal. That's what we're working towards. And part of the proposal, we were trying to get it done for this meeting, but one of the sticking points is talking about how many visioning sessions and how many workshops we're going to have. So those are part of the plan.
Yeah, okay, well, I agree with Randy that I think that we need to get some clarity on that. I'm not sure how we go about that after all these years, but, okay. Brian, did you have something for the agenda?
No, I just want to, I will not be at the November 12th meeting.
Okay, gonna have your proxy?
No.
Seriously.
But it is up for bid. It's my birthday, so I wanted to at least have an
golden,
excuse.
right? You and.
Well, if anything's
what's his
2 to
name
2, I'll
from-
call in.
Yeah, the governor of Illinois, yeah, right.
Oh, just to follow up with Randy's comments, couldn't we just have a simple meeting with the school board, a closed meeting, not open to the public? That's not allowed.
We had a very complicated simple
wait,
meeting.
I have a question. How come we can go on retreat?
That wouldn't be.
Well, yeah, they're public also by
public.
So you mean the
Brown
public
Act.
can come
Oh, yeah.
to the
Absolutely.
dinner?
There is no way legally for the
Okay.
city
Okay,
council and the
okay.
school board to meet
When I hear
outside
the
of
word
public view.
retreat, I envision us going into the mountains and.
Yeah, it can be at a different location, but it has to be public.
We live in the mountains, we're here.
Well,
We don't need to leave here.
yeah.
Okay, agenda items.
But if, I mean, we haven't heard, I'm assuming we haven't heard any follow-up to that meeting, and that in itself is problematic. That sends some kind of sign. So perhaps, James, you can simply reach out and ask when we can expect to hear back.
Well, have they set a date for the work, because they canceled
they
their
canceled.
workshop? so,
They haven't
you know,
set a new date yet.
We're
I was
kind of
plan-
waiting on them, Susan.
I am planning to reach out this week. It's been on my list, so we'll reach out to them
Okay,
this week.
okay, thank you. Okay, so we had, at the beginning of the meeting, a woman speaking, Susan Whitewood, was that her name? The No Place Like Home Act. Is the council interested in a report on that? It seems that we should have that on a future agenda. Okay?
Well, I
And
don't
then-
know, at least I don't define we're ready for an agenda item yet, although that would be if the council would like. But I would be interested in having the city staff provide all of us with, say, an example of, they said rounds 1 and 2 have already come and gone. Okay, what are the projects? Where are they? We can
And she-
take a look at one of these.
she
Yeah, the only
offered
other
to
thing
do a
I'd add on that is
presentation.
if we're dealing with anything homeless, we may want to reach out to the homeless, the family shelter, excuse me.
Yeah,
Their
yeah.
problem is they're all churches, so the tax incentives don't benefit them. They don't have brick and mortar, but maybe there is some or some idea of how because that's kind of our really only entity, and it doesn't fit real well with that grant money. But maybe they'll make an exception or something since they're because they're not paying any taxes. Because I was thinking the way they were saying it, if there was a church in town that wanted to add 5 units to the back of the church, they might be able to benefit from some of the grant money, but they're not going to benefit from any of the taxes. The tax benefits. So.
Yeah, and Joe already met with Suzanne after the meeting. He texted me, so we will continue to meet with them, and we'll report back on whether it's at a council meeting or just a informational.
Yeah, if you could find out who's already invented the wheel someplace. The county of Ventura owns property down at 150 and 33, generally across the way from the Honor Farm plus the Honor Farm. And when you start talking about those things and needing facilities and mixture, it seems to me that since they're from the Behavioral Health County Agency, until we get a general, maybe this is another topic to go along with the school district's issue, where in town would you put something like that? We have 5 units. Somebody want to put it over on Montgomery?
Yeah.
James, if you would make a note of this too, because when I was at the last VCOG meeting I was at, when Mike Powers, the CEO of the county, spoke, he was talking about what the county's done and the investment they've made. But one of the big things that they talked about was not the housing and the structure that the building, although it added beds, which was very helpful. It was a lot about the new tracking system that they have so they can follow individuals who are in the system for mental health and homelessness and other stuff, track them through all their doctor's appointments, all these things, all these follow-ups. I don't think that the family shelter in Ojai has any access to that. But if there was a way to integrate that, they talked about how successful that's been because they can track individuals. And if there's some way to integrate that, it seems like it's going to be a really helpful thing. We know we get people from Ventura and others places where they've probably been in that system up here, it would be helpful because they said that data is really supplying them, which is why they were willing to pull the trigger on building that infrastructure.
Okay.
I think, Mayor, also what I heard was, to make it part of your affordable housing development is taking a percentage of affordable housing and turn it into homeless units and things of that nature. So I don't, as much as we all want to do affordable housing here, we're not doing anything right now. So other than the Montgomery complex.
Well, if we
So-
turn it over to somebody who knows how to do it, like the Housing
Do it,
Authority,
right.
and get it done,
Right.
what concerns me is the mixture. I mean, it sounds great on the surface, but we haven't even addressed some of the simple stuff to do. This would be very, and doing it with private developers, you'd have to have a site. You'd have to decide where you were going to put it. If you think you've got difficulties.
That's why I asked about land acquisition.
Yeah, so, okay.
Okay, I'm not done.
Maybe they.
I'm not done. I'm not
Maybe they have
done.
extra room or something
Okay.
they want to monetize.
May I continue with future agenda?
Yeah, I haven't heard one yet, but go ahead.
Yeah,
What-
well,
what?
okay, so what I would like to do is send, I want to know how to do this. I would like trees to go back on the agenda. All the trees in issues, how to get all the agencies working together, the whole 9 yards, and I have a comprehensive plan that I'd like to kind of just submit it and then see if we can get council support. I think a lot of people are asking about trees. We're getting a steady stream. The Planning Commission is discussing trees.
Okay, we're starting to have a little, at least in my view, a little difficulty on focusing. What we do here at the council chamber is to take something that's already formed as an idea, a program or whatever.
Yeah, I have that. I have that.
Right, okay,
Yeah.
and then make a motion to put it on the agenda and see if there's interest in if the document is ready for prime time.
Okay, I'll make a motion that we put that on the agenda.
And what is it, you say all the things about
Well,
trees?
I
What
don't-
does that mean?
Okay, I'll read I have all these flurry of emails from different people, and this is from Kathy Nolan. If council's interested and agrees and has buy-in from the tree committee and Ojai Trees, cross-collaboration in the past or a restructure, staff is willing to start the application process. I also agree that we need to create a program for mass tree planning and include watering and maintenance, which could be a joint agreement project between valley-wide or watershed-wide agencies, nonprofits, the schools, private property owners, and mass mobilization project. And we have to, the staff report would have to include funding, coordinations, a whole systems approach.
So
I'm not saying this has to be this year, I'm just saying that it should be on the horizon.
Well, and one thing we have done, because it was relatively simple, is the Tree City USA
Yeah, I watched that,
topic
yeah.
came up, and we looked into it, and it's very simple for us to get Tree City USA certified. For people that don't know, we have the sign up that says we're a Tree City. We haven't been a Tree City for 10 years, and it's fairly easy to be a
Yeah.
Tree City.
Yeah.
I mean, we are a Tree City.
Yeah.
So we are planning to bring that to council. So that's a first step towards
Okay.
this, to reestablish the city as a tree city.
Okay, that's good to know.
Yeah,
Good.
so that's on our future list.
Okay. And then, one more, the other things I'll wait on, but
Yeah.
I did not,
Sousa, this is not what this time is for.
it's future agenda.
Yeah, no, it's for the next agenda, something
Oh,
that it's already been formulated. I mean, this other sounds great, and it's meeting with the staff and working up something.
Okay.
But we're not going to be able to do it, here. It's sort of a little too vague.
Okay, I want to request, a lot of people have asked about this, and I did not attend any of the, I'm sorry, but I did not attend any of the emergency meetings that were held. And so the public wants to know what our emergency plan is. So, I mean, all I saw on the website was something from way back at the beginning of the year, just because of the blackouts and all that, people want to know what our plan is. So maybe you could simply update the website
Yeah, there's a couple things we can do. We were talking about scheduling a disaster council meeting upcoming
Okay.
too, so that would be
Okay.
another option. I think we're looking at scheduling one in the next month.
Okay, thank you. That was my question. I'm done now, sorry. Okay.
Now,
Okay.
we do have an emergency plan. If your question is do we have a way on the website for people to access that? It should be available. Is it, do you know if it is, Jane?
You know, offhand I don't, so we'll check that too.
There is something.
I
There
don't
is
think that
something.
anybody's going to read it and,
If there's no
not go to
electricity,
sleep because
yeah.
it's a very technical kind of a document.
General.
Yeah. But when you post the next emergency or disaster council meeting, put
could do
that
that.
on there and people,
Yeah.
yeah,
And
come.
our emergency plan is mostly internal operations, right, James? It's not really it's not a public plan in the sense that people might think it's like, go here, do this.
Yeah, I had a meeting with
It's
somebody.
our emergency response.
To your point, I had a meeting with somebody last week, and they said, "What exactly would we do if there was a public safety power shut off?
Yeah.
Where would everybody go?" And then the idea they had actually was kind of interesting, was to have a party during it,
Yeah,
where
that
we'd have
was-
everybody come. There's nothing like that in the emergency plan. It's a general technical document with all the different possibilities. So.
And part of the emergency plan includes like CERT training, which is going on right now, that Leslie Ferraro and I are taking the class down at Oakview. It's it's that ready, set, go.
Yeah.
Delaney has made up those DVDs that you are available. I think, do we have?
Still air that on Channel 10 every week.
Right, and the DVDs are, I think, available. You can, I assume that there's a price or something not very expensive for people as to what to do for themselves. Everything else then goes to the Emergency Operating Center, to first responders, public safety. So I'd be happy to even hold a session if you'd like to join me and host it for those people that are calling and want to know about what it is. Most people ask about it because, one, they're uncertain and scared, but the other is they expect some kind of door-to-door service which doesn't exist. It's so we can have one of those kind of evening workshop if you'd like.
Sure.
And when James and I had we were meeting with the rep from the emergency services in the county, they made it clear, every emergency is so uniquely different. We talked about shootings, we talked about earthquakes, we talked about fires, we talked about floods. They're all significantly, the responses are so different, there is no one-size-fits-all approach. What is in place that we talked about was the infrastructure to make sure we can communicate, we can get responders out there, we can identify people, we can get information that we have on the ground to the county and disseminate it in the best possible way.
Well, I think the community question is how do we disseminate information to the community? That was one of the negatives in
Yeah.
from the Thomas Fire.
Yeah.
Was the community was getting information from a young man in Washington, D.C. More on-time information, and I forget his name, but I think that's their concern.
Yeah.
I agree with you 100%, Mayor. And Ryan too. And every disaster is going to be unique in how it's responded to. But I think the community would just like to know if the lights are on, who's going to put them back on?
Yeah. There were three main points when we met with Patrick from Office of Emergency Services, if I can make them real quick. One was subscribe to VC Alert now, so you get text messages to your phone, in your location.
And the county's looking for where you don't have to opt in, but currently you have to opt in. It is not a push notification that the county can send you. If you want updates on your phone in real time, you have got to sign up for it. Even if you're here in the county, even if you're a resident, you still got to sign up. So.
And go in and update. Mine still alerts me for my old address. I need to go in and update.
Yeah, when they put in the reverse 911 years ago when people had landlines, and the problem now is that will go to a landline, but most people don't have them anymore. They have cell phones. So in order to have the cell phone, you have to subscribe.
But the cell phones will be dead if we don't have electricity, so people need to know how to get solar batteries. That is on your press release. The emergency, the emergency press release is good.
Yeah, thank you.
There is Gail pulled up the emergency operations plan.
Yeah.
It's 95 pages long. It's on our city website, so there is information out there. Again, I think they're looking for a different type of information.
But whoever was looking for it didn't find it. They looked.
I know.
Yeah, but so maybe it's too hard to find.
You can look at that, but
Yeah.
the other 2 points real quick. So VC Alert's one, VC Emergency is the other, which is updated, and they're putting an emphasis on updating it more quickly, more accurately. And then third, which no one likes to hear this, but they've told us to get the message out, is people should be prepared because public safety will not always be able to get to you in an emergency. So have gas in your tank, have water, have food, all that stuff.
Right. So if you get a list of these people who are interested, let's set a time, and I will be glad to come and chat with them because.
Oh, yeah, they want,
Yeah.
Chris Wallen wants to do that,
Yeah, okay, that's good.
Yeah.
All right, Bill, thank you. I owe you, Bill. Okay, we're done, thank you.